Welcome back, legends, and if you're new here, welcome. This channel is all about powerful Harry Potter what if stories, where we explore alternate destinies, hidden power awakenings, and the darker secrets of the wizarding world. Today's topic is super exciting, as you saw in the title. What if Harry Potter saved a Goblin Prince at age 6 and made Gringotts swear loyalty to him forever? Quick note before we begin. This video is self-recorded and created in line with YouTube's latest policies. Every story here is originally written, creatively edited, and made purely for storytelling and entertainment. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to subscribe. Now, let's begin.
Chapter 1. The Cupboard Under the Stairs. The dark was a living thing. It breathed with him. It pressed against his ribs with every inhale, a thick, dusty blanket made of nothing at all. It had a taste: old wood, damp concrete, the sour ghost of polish from the hall outside. Harry knew this dark. It was his first memory. It was his bedroom. He was curled on his side, the thin mattress scratching his cheek. His knees were drawn up nearly to his chin, feet tangled in the threadbare blanket. The numbers on the glowing green dial of the old digital clock he'd salvaged from the bin flicked over. 4:17 a.m. The Dursleys were asleep. The house was a tomb of polished normality above him, but down here, in the cupboard under the stairs, the silence was different. It was a waiting silence. A sharp, familiar ache pulsed behind his eyes. It wasn't a headache. It was the other thing. The thing that happened when Aunt Petunia yanked his hair too hard, or Dudley's gang chased him, or Uncle Vernon's face turned that dangerous shade of purple. A pressure. A heat, right in the center of his forehead, beneath the fringe he kept long to hide the odd, lightning-shaped scar. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to push it down. Don't be freakish, he thought, parroting Uncle Vernon's favorite word. The word was a stone in his stomach. But the pressure didn't recede. It grew, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. And with it came the whispers. Not voices. Not really. More like echoes of feeling. A sense of green, deep and emerald, like the glass in the church window. A flash of gold, so bright it hurt. And a sound, a high, desperate chittering, a scrape of claw on stone, a feeling of pure, animal terror that was not animal at all. Harry's breath hitched. He opened his eyes, staring into the dark. The terror wasn't his. It was being pushed into him, through the scar, a radio signal tuned to a station of pain. Help! The word formed in his mind, clear and cold as an ice chip. He sat up, banging his head on the slanted ceiling. He didn't cry out. He never cried out. Rubbing his skull, he clambered out of his makeshift bed, his small hands finding the cupboard door latch in the pitch black. He knew this space better than he knew his own face in the mirror, a face he avoided. The hall was cooler, a strip of muted pre-dawn gray from the fanlight over the front door. The house was utterly still. The polished floorboards were icy under his bare feet. The feeling in his head was a compass needle, tugging him. Not towards the kitchen. Not towards the garden. It was pulling him out. He paused at the foot of the stairs, his heart a frantic bird in his chest. If Uncle Vernon found him out of his cupboard. A new image seared behind his eyes. A cage of iron, too small, cutting into dark, leathery skin. The chittering scream echoed in his skull. Harry didn't decide. His body moved. His small, nimble fingers undid the chain, turned the deadbolt, twisted the Yale lock, practiced, silent movements. He slipped out into the chill of Privet Drive. The street was a tableau of identical sleeping houses, bathed in the sickly orange of the street lamps. The tug in his forehead was a physical thing now, a hook behind his eyes. It led him down the path, across the dew-soaked lawn, to the front hedge. He crawled through a gap he used when escaping Dudley, his pajamas soaking through instantly. And then he was running. He didn't know where. He didn't know why. His feet slapped the cold pavement, past the blank windows of number 6, number 8. The world was a blur of orange and gray. The terror in his mind was a rising tide, threatening to drown him. He wasn't Harry Potter, the boy in the cupboard. He was a vessel for a scream. He ran until his lungs burned, past the park, into the older part of Little Whinging, where the houses were bigger, set back behind walls. The tug veered sharply, yanking him off the road, through a broken wooden gate and into a wild, overgrown cemetery surrounding a small, crumbling church. The graveyard was a jungle of tilted stones and grasping brambles. The orange light didn't reach here. It was the dark of the cupboard, but alive and breathing. The whispering in his head was a cacophony now. The chittering, snarling, guttural voices that made Uncle Vernon's sound kind. Finish it here. The little beast bit me. Silver's waiting, just want the proof. Harry crouched behind a large, mossy angel, peering around its stone wing. In a clearing between the graves, lit by a single, hovering ball of sickly yellow light, 3 figures stood. They were like nothing he had ever seen. Tall, skeletally thin, with skin like pale, stretched parchment and heads too large for their bodies. Their ears were long and pointed, their fingers ended in filthy, sharp nails, and their eyes glinted red in the magical light. They wore mismatched, rusted scraps of armor. Goblins. The word dropped into his mind from a story he'd half read in a library book, but these were not the pictures. These were cruel and real. 2 of them held heavy, iron-tipped spears. The third, taller than the rest, held a rusted cage. And inside the cage, a small figure huddled, shivering. It was also a goblin, but where the others were ugly and harsh, this one was different. Younger. Its skin was a warmer, nut brown, not pale gray. Its large, intelligent eyes, currently wide with fear, were a deep, liquid black, not red. It was dressed in what looked like a finely made tunic of dark green, now torn and stained. A delicate silver circlet, bent and askew, sat upon its brow. Last chance, Runty Prince, sneered the cage holder, his voice like grinding stones. Tell us the vault sequence. The one your soft-hearted sire whispered to you. The little Goblin Prince bared its needle-like teeth, a defiant hiss escaping. The king's word is iron. It breaks for no traitor. My blood is my own. The goblin with the cage shook it violently. The prince tumbled, a small cry of pain escaping. Your blood will be on the stones, then. A shame. You might have grown into those ears. The other 2 laughed, a horrible, rasping sound. The hook behind Harry's eyes was a white-hot brand. The prince's fear was his fear. The prince's defiance was a spark in his own hollow chest. He didn't think of magic. He didn't think of being 6. He didn't think at all. As the lead goblin drew a long, cruel-looking dagger from his belt, Harry moved. He didn't run at them. He was too small, too weak. Instead, he focused on the source of the light, the floating yellow ball. He thought of the Dursleys' living room lamp, of desperately wanting to turn it off without touching it when Uncle Vernon was shouting. He thought of the pressure, the heat, the want. Go out. Asterisk. The pain in his scar exploded. A white-hot lance shot from his forehead, not a beam of light, but a wave of pure, silent force. Pop. Asterisk. The yellow light winked out. Complete, absolute darkness swallowed the clearing. Curses erupted in guttural gobbledygook. Who's there? A wizard. Find him. Harry was already moving, silent as a shadow on the damp grass. He knew dark. The dark was his friend. He circled the confused, stumbling goblins, his bare feet making no sound. He reached the cage. The prince was frozen, staring into the blackness. Harry's small hands fumbled for the latch. It was a complex, twisted metal hook. He couldn't see it. He felt it. The pressure in his head shifted, focusing. He imagined it unlocking. He willed it open. With a soft, metallic click, it did. He swung the cage door open. Come on, he whispered, the word barely audible. The prince didn't hesitate. It scrambled out, small, clawed hands grabbing Harry's arm for balance. Its touch was cool, its grip surprisingly strong. The lead goblin whirled towards the sound. There. A spear whistled through the air. Harry didn't see it, he felt its path. He yanked the prince down behind a large gravestone. The spearhead struck granite with a shower of sparks, so close the wind of its passage ruffled his hair. They were trapped. The goblins were fanning out, their red eyes now gleaming as they adjusted to the dark. Harry could hear their ragged breathing, smell their foul, unwashed scent. The prince was trembling against him. The lead goblin stalked closer, dagger gleaming dully. Little human worm, you've stolen silver. That's a death sentence. The panic was a cold wave. But beneath it, beneath the borrowed terror of the prince, something else rose in Harry. A hotter, brighter anger. It wasn't the dull, helpless rage of the cupboard. This was sharp, clear. They wanted to hurt this small, trapped creature. They wanted to hurt him. They were like Dudley's gang, but worse. They were bullies with knives. The heat in his scar wasn't pain anymore. It was power. It filled him, a rushing, roaring river with no place to go. The lead goblin raised his dagger, inches away. Harry looked up, meeting those red eyes. He didn't flinch. The anger focused, crystallized. He didn't want to hide the light now. He wanted to show them. He didn't shout. He breathed the word into the space between them. Number. The world erupted in green light. It wasn't a spell. It was a detonation. It blasted outwards from him in a silent, emerald ring, visible for a heartbeat. It passed through the stones, the trees, the goblins. It did not burn. It did not cut. It unmade. The lead goblin's dagger dissolved into a shower of orange sparks that faded to ash. The rusted armor of the others fell from their bodies, crumbling like rotten biscuits. The magic holding their spears together failed. Wooden shafts splintered, metal heads thudded to the grass. The yellow light, trying to reignite in one goblin's hand, snuffed out forever. The three goblins staggered back as if struck by a physical blow. They clutched their heads, not in pain, but in a profound, terrifying disorientation. The magic in their veins, the power they had been wielding, was gone. Not drained, silenced, as if a fundamental part of their being had been momentarily erased. The clearing was dark again, save for the faint, fading emerald glow that clung to Harry's small form like mist. He was on his knees, gasping, the world tilting dangerously. The prince clung to him, its dark eyes reflecting the dying light with awe and terror. The lead goblin stared at his empty hands, at the pile of dust that was his dagger. He looked at Harry, not with hatred now, but with a primal, superstitious fear. He hissed a word in his own tongue that sounded like a curse and a prayer combined. Without another sound, the three turned and fled, crashing through the undergrowth, their footsteps receding into the night. Silence returned, deeper than before. Harry slumped, the immense energy deserting him, leaving a hollow, shaky exhaustion. The prince slowly released its grip. Its voice was high, clear, but raspy from disuse. It spoke English with a sharp, clipped accent. You are a hatchling. A human hatchling. What are you? Harry could only shake his head, his throat too tight for words. He was just Harry. Cold, tired, scared Harry. The little goblin prince straightened its torn tunic with a dignity that seemed absurd given the circumstances. It reached up and carefully straightened the silver circlet on its brow. Then it did something astonishing. It sank to one knee on the damp grass before Harry, its head bowed. I am Griphook, son of Ragnarok, of the Deep Dweller clan, blood heir to the sundered throne, it said, the words formal and heavy. You have shed your blood's power for my life. You have broken iron with will alone. This is a debt, a life debt. By stone and silver, by blood and axe, it must be paid. Harry stared, utterly bewildered. You don't have to. It is not a choice. Griphook looked up, his black eyes intense. It is law, the oldest law. My life is yours until the debt is cleansed. And my people, we pay our debts. A fierce, proud light entered his eyes. Tell me your name, human hatchling. Who do I owe my life to? The word felt too small for this strange, dark night. It felt insignificant, but it was all he had. Harry, he whispered. Just Harry. Harry. Griphook tasted the name. He nodded once, a decisive, sharp gesture. Then he reached out one long-fingered hand. His claw touched the center of Harry's forehead, right on the lightning scar. A jolt, like static electricity but warmer, passed between them. The world seemed to sharpen. Harry could see the individual threads in Griphook's tunic, hear the distant hoot of an owl 3 streets over, smell the specific type of moss on the angel's wing. A mark calls to a mark, Griphook murmured, his eyes wide. Fate is not idle tonight. He stood, his movements now sure and swift. You are hurt. Your power is raw. It has scorched you. You cannot stay here. The traitors may return with others. I have to go home, Harry said, the word, home, tasting like dust. No. Griphook's tone brooked no argument. It was a prince's tone. That place, it smells of caged fear and small hatreds. It is not a den for you. He grasped Harry's hand. His skin was cool, leathery. Come, my people have a place. A safe place. We will go to the heart of stone. We will go to Gringotts. Gringotts, the kingdom under the mountain. Where my father rules. Where your debt will be witnessed. Griphook's gaze was unyielding. Will you come, Harry who saved the prince? The sky was beginning to lighten, a pale gray bleeding into the black. Soon, Aunt Petunia would be up. Soon, they would find the cupboard empty. There would be shouting. There would be punishment. There would be the dark again, but now it would feel even smaller. He looked at the small, fierce creature holding his hand. He looked back towards the direction of Privet Drive, a place of gray numbness and sharp pain. The choice wasn't a choice at all. He nodded. Griphook smiled, a sharp, toothy expression that held no malice, only fierce satisfaction. From within his torn tunic, he pulled a small, twisted piece of silver metal, a tiny, intricate key. He held it up. It caught the first feeble ray of dawn light. "Hold tight, Harry." He turned the key in the empty air. There was a sound like a giant, rusty lock turning. The world folded itself around the key. The gravestones, the church, the fading night, they stretched into impossible, swirling colors. Harry felt a tremendous, invisible hook slam into his navel and yank him forward, off his feet, into a whirlwind of screaming light and pressure. The last thing he saw before the vortex swallowed him was the determined set of Griphook's jaw, and the silver circlet shining like a star in the chaos. And then Privet Drive, Little Whinging, and everything he had ever known, was gone. Chapter 2, The Heart of Stone. The world was a tunnel of howling color and gut-wrenching force. It wasn't like falling. It was like being pulled, stretched thin as a rubber band, every atom of him screaming in protest. The hook behind his navel was an iron claw, relentless. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't scream. He could only exist as a streak of terror in a kaleidoscope of melting stone and warped light. A small, cool, clawed hand was locked around his wrist, an anchor in the madness. Just as suddenly as it began, it ended. The pressure vanished. The noise ceased. Harry stumbled forward onto solid, cool ground, his legs buckling. He retched, but there was nothing in his empty stomach to bring up. He swayed on his hands and knees, gasping, the world spinning in nauseating circles. "First journey is always the worst," Griphook's voice said, close by. There was a hint of sympathy buried under the matter-of-fact tone. Harry blinked, forcing his eyes to focus. The air here was different. It was cool, dry, and carried a deep, mineral scent, stone, metal, and something else, a cold, clean smell like ancient earth. The light was a soft, sourceless gold, neither too bright nor dim. He pushed himself up, his palms scraping on smooth, polished flagstones. They were in a corridor. But to call it a corridor was to call the sky a bit of blue. It was monumental. A vast, soaring passageway carved from what looked like pure white marble, veined with threads of glistening black and gold. The ceiling was lost in shadowy heights, from which colossal stone buttresses arched down like the ribs of a buried giant. Between them, intricate mosaics covered the walls, depicting scenes of mountains being carved, rivers of molten gold, and stern, dignified goblin faces. The floor was a map of the world inlaid in bronze, silver, and mother of pearl. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the most real place Harry had ever seen, and it made Privet Drive seem like a faded paper cutout. Griphook stood beside him, already straightening his tunic with sharp, precise tugs. The little Goblin Prince seemed taller here, imbued with the authority of the stone around them. His black eyes scanned the corridor, which was, for the moment, empty. "Welcome," Griphook said softly, "to the grand concourse of Gringotts Wizarding Bank. The artery of the kingdom." Harry could only stare. His pajamas were damp and filthy from the graveyard grass, a stark, pathetic contrast to the majestic splendor. He felt smaller than he ever had in his cupboard. The sound of clicking, measured footsteps echoed from further down the concourse. Griphook's posture shifted, becoming rigid, his chin lifting. Around a distant curve, a goblin appeared. This one was unlike the traitors in the graveyard, and even different from Griphook. He was older, his nut-brown skin etched with fine lines like cracks in old leather. He wore robes of deep crimson, impeccably tailored, with a heavy chain of office around his neck made of interlocking platinum gears. His eyes, a sharp, assessing flint gray, took in the scene in an instant, the disheveled prince, the ragged human child. He did not run. He did not gasp. His pace never altered. He walked until he was 10 feet away, then stopped, and gave a bow so shallow it was almost an insult. "Prince Griphook, you were not expected. The King's Guard reported you missing from your chambers hours ago." "An oversight, Account Manager Ragnick," Griphook replied, his voice dripping with a frost Harry hadn't heard before. "I was detained by traitors of the Deep Dweller clan. They sought to extract the royal vault sequence through persuasion. Ragnar's gray eyes flicked to Harry, then back to Griphook. Not a muscle moved in his face. I see. And the fate of these traitors? Disarmed. Dispersed. Their magic was quieted. Griphook paused, letting the strange word hang in the air. By him. Now Ragnar gave Harry his full attention. The gaze was like being weighed on a scale made of ice. Harry fought the urge to shuffle his feet, to hide behind Griphook. He met the old goblin's eyes, his own green ones wide but unwavering. A human child, Ragnar stated. A magical human child, by the residual aura. But young, very young. He quieted 3 armed warriors of the Deep Dweller bloodline. He saved my life, Griphook said, and the words were a hammer blow, final and absolute. He invoked a life debt. By stone and silver, I have brought him to the Hall of Records to bear witness. For the first time, a crack appeared in Ragnar's impassive facade. His nostrils flared slightly. A life debt. To a human. A wizard. He said the last word like it was a disease. The king must be informed. The king will be, Griphook said, his tone brooking no argument. After the witness is sealed. The law is clear, account manager. The debt precedes all other protocols. Even royal displeasure. A long, silent moment stretched between them, filled only by the distant, eternal drip of water on stone somewhere in the heights. Finally, Ragnar gave another infinitesimal bow. The law is iron. This way. He turned and began walking back the way he came, his footsteps the only sound. Griphook nudged Harry forward. Stay close. Do not speak unless I tell you to. Do not touch anything. They followed Ragnar deeper into the mountain. They passed towering bronze doors engraved with warnings in runes that seemed to shift when Harry looked at them. They crossed a bridge over a chasm so deep the bottom was swallowed in luminous blue mist, from which the distant, rhythmic clang of enormous hammers echoed up. Goblins in neat uniforms of black and gold passed them, giving sharp, respectful nods to Ragnar and curious, piercing stares at Harry. Their eyes were not all red like the traitors, they were black, gray, amber, silver. Each gaze felt like a pinprick on his skin. The concourse opened into a vast, circular chamber. This was the heart of the noise. Hundreds of goblins worked at long, polished counters of dark wood, wielding quills that wrote on their own, weighing piles of glittering coins on scales that sang in tiny, chiming voices, speaking in low, rapid gobbledygook to wizards and witches in colorful robes who looked nervous and out of place. The air hummed with magic, 1,000 different notes, the crisp tang of minted metal, the oily slide of protective enchantments, the dry whisper of ancient parchment. Harry clung to Griphook's side, utterly overwhelmed. The magical people were almost as strange as the goblins, a witch with a live vulture on her hat, a wizard whose beard was braided with little bells that tinkled as he argued over a bag of sapphires. This was the world his parents had come from. A world that had left him on a doorstep in a basket. Ragnar led them past the main counters, through a small, unmarked door that blended seamlessly into the wall. The noise of the bank fell away, replaced by a profound, sacred silence. They entered the Hall of Records. It was a library, but one forged in metal and stone. Instead of books, there were shelves upon shelves of scrolls, each encased in a tube of precious metal, copper, silver, gold, platinum, and etched with tiny, precise runes. The room was lit by glowing orbs of crystal set into the jaws of sculpted dragon skulls that protruded from the walls. At the far end, on a dais of black obsidian, sat a single, immense anvil made of dull gray iron. It radiated age and solemnity. 3 goblins awaited them there, even older than Ragnar. They stood like statues, dressed in simple gray robes. Their eyes were milky white, blind, yet Harry had the unsettling feeling they saw everything. Elder scribes, Ragnar announced, his voice hushed. Prince Griphook, of the direct bloodline, comes to bear witness to a life debt incurred under the open sky, paid in blood and power. He brings the life creditor. The centermost scribe slowly turned his head towards Harry. His voice was the sound of parchment crumbling. Name the life creditor. Griphook stepped forward. He is called Harry. Family, lineage, magical affiliation. He gave no other name. His power is untrained. Raw. He is 6 human years of age. A ripple went through the 3 scribes. The one on the right spoke, his voice slightly higher. A life debt from a royal to a wizard child. The accounts are unbalanced. The interest will be complex. It is not a matter of interest. Griphook snapped, then lowered his voice. It is a matter of law. He stood against traitors. He broke their weapons with a word. He freed me. The debt is incurred. I have brought him for witness and seal. The first scribe extended a long, bony hand, palm up. The life creditor will approach. Griphook pushed Harry gently forward. Harry walked slowly across the cold floor until he stood before the dais, looking up at the blind goblins. He felt laid bare, more than when Aunt Petunia made him strip for flea inspections. A hand, the scribe commanded. Harry lifted his right hand. The scribe's cold, dry fingers closed around his wrist. With his other hand, the scribe produced a slender silver stylus from his robe. Without a word, he pressed the tip into the pad of Harry's index finger. A sharp sting. A bead of blood, dark red, welled up. The scribe guided Harry's hand over a blank, rectangular plate of pure silver that lay on the anvil. He pressed Harry's finger to the metal. Where the blood touched, it did not smear. It was absorbed, sinking into the silver like water into sand. Runes flared to life around it, swirling, angular shapes that burned with a cold white light. They told a story in a language Harry couldn't read. A small figure standing before three larger ones, a burst of light, a cage opening. Next, the scribe turned to Griphook, who offered his own hand without being asked. The same silver stylus, a new prick. Griphook's blood, a darker, almost blackish red, dripped onto the same silver plate, beside Harry's mark. The two blood marks did not touch. But between them, a third set of runes erupted, binding them together in a complex, interlocking pattern. The air in the room grew heavier, charged with a deep, resonant magic that vibrated in Harry's teeth. The dead is witnessed, the three scribes intoned together, their voices echoing in the stone chamber. Recorded in silver, sealed in stone, the life of Griphook, son of Ragnarok, is held in trust by Harry, human child. Until the debt is paid, or forfeit in blood, the account stands open. There was a final, blinding flash of white light from the anvil. When it faded, the silver plate was gone. In its place was a simple, thick coin of the same metal. On one side was the profile of a goblin in a crown. On the other, a simplified lightning bolt. The centermost scribe picked up the coin and held it out. Harry, unsure, took it. It was warm, and hummed faintly against his skin. "That is your debt, Chit," Griphook said quietly from behind him. "It is proof. It is also a call. Should you ever be in mortal need, break it. I will come." Harry clutched the coin, the metal biting into his palm. It felt like the only real thing in a world that had gone utterly mad. Ragnarok, who had observed the entire ceremony in stony silence, finally spoke. "The witness is sealed. Now, by protocol, the life creditor must be presented to the king. The king," he added, a note of grim anticipation in his voice, "is not expecting company." The walk to the throne room was a descent. Into deeper, more oppressive splendor. The polished marble gave way to raw, living rock, glittering with embedded crystals and veins of pure ore. The air grew warmer, smelling of forged smoke and hot metal. Guards appeared, clad not in bank uniforms but in brutal, functional armor of black steel, their faces hidden behind helms shaped like snarling beast heads. They carried axes that looked like they could cleave a car in two. The great doors to the throne room were two slabs of solid bronze, 50 feet high, engraved with a panoramic scene of a mountain being hollowed out by countless goblin hands. As they approached, the doors began to swing inwards without a sound, revealing the chamber beyond. Harry's breath caught. It was not a room built. It was a cavern claimed. A natural cathedral of stone, so vast the far walls were shrouded in gloom. Stalactites and stalagmites the size of oak trees met in the center, forming great, twisted columns. But the goblins had sculpted them, carving them into intricate latticework, gilding them with gold, inlaying them with gems that glowed with their own inner fire. A river of molten gold, wide and slow, flowed across the back of the chamber, casting a shimmering, hellish light over everything. And on a throne carved from a single, massive hunk of jet-black obsidian, sat the Goblin King. Ragnarok was not merely old. He was ancient. Time had not bent him, it had compacted him, like coal into diamond. He was smaller than his son, but his presence filled the cavern. His skin was the color of dark granite, his white hair pulled back in a severe, thick braid that fell over one shoulder of his simple black tunic. On his brow rested a crown, but it was no delicate circlet like Griphook's. It was a band of rough, uncut diamonds set in iron, looking less like jewelry and more like a knuckle-duster made for a god. His eyes were the color of burnt gold, and they burned with an intelligence that was immediately, terrifyingly aware. They swept over Ragnik, dismissed him. They landed on Griphook, and a flicker of something, relief, fury, passed through them. Then they settled on Harry. The weight of that gaze was physical. Harry felt it press on his shoulders, trying to force him to his knees. He locked his legs, clutching the dead chit so hard he thought the metal might melt. "Father," Griphook said, stepping forward and bowing deeply. "Son." The king's voice was low, a rumble of falling rock deep in the earth. "You are late for your metallurgy lesson. You are also accompanied. There was an attempt on my life. By Dagmar's faction. They took me from the lower galleries." The gold eyes narrowed. The temperature in the cavern seemed to drop. Dagmar. The name was a curse. His ambition outpaces his loyalty. And these traitors, disarmed, their magic silenced. By the human child, Harry. He saved me. A life debt has been witnessed and sealed in the Hall of Records. The king was silent for a long, long time. The only sound was the deep, molten gurgle of the Gold River. "A life debt," the king repeated slowly. "To a wizard." He leaned forward, the obsidian throne groaning subtly under the shift. "Come here, wizard child." Harry looked at Griphook, who gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He walked forward, his bare feet silent on the smooth stone floor. He stopped at the foot of the dais, looking up at the powerful, immovable figure. The king's burnt gold eyes scanned him, from his messy black hair to his dirty, bare feet. They lingered on his forehead, on the scar partly hidden by his fringe. "That mark," the king murmured. "I know that magic. Old magic. Killing magic." His gaze sharpened, piercing through Harry. "What is your full name, child?" He had never said it altogether. It felt dangerous here, but he had no other. "Harry Potter." A shockwave went through the cavern that had nothing to do with sound. The guards at the door stiffened. Ragnik inhaled sharply. The king's hands, which had been resting calmly on the arms of his throne, tightened, his knuckles turning white. "Potter." The word was expelled like a stone. The child of the Potters. The one who lived. He stared at Harry as if seeing a ghost, a monument, and a terrible problem all at once. "You were hidden. Among the non-magical. Dumbledore's great sacrifice." A sneer touched his lips. "And now you are here. In my hall. Holding a life debt over my heir." Harry didn't understand half of what he said, but the hostility was clear. "I didn't want a debt," he said, his voice small but clear in the vast space. He was scared. They had him in a cage." The king's eyes flickered to Griphook, a question in them. Griphook gave a single, firm nod. "It is true." The king leaned back, steepling his fingers. The calculating look returned, colder now. "A Potter. In debt to a Goblin Prince. The irony is not lost on me. Your family vault is quite substantial, you know. One of the oldest client accounts in the bank. And now you hold a chit that could command the future king of the very bank that guards it." He let out a low, humorless chuckle. The wizarding world would have an aneurysm. He stood up. He was not tall, but his presence seemed to expand, dominating the space. He descended the dais steps until he stood directly before Harry, looking down at him. "Here is the reality, Harry Potter. You hold a debt over my son's life. By our oldest laws, we are honor-bound to you. But we are not friends to wizards. We are not allies. We are bankers. We are warriors. We remember wars your people have forgotten. That debt chit in your hand is a chain, but it binds us both." He bent down, his face close to Harry's. The smell of him was ozone and hot iron. "You are a child of two worlds, and welcome in neither. The human world cages you. The wizarding world will use you. They will see a symbol, a weapon, a story. They will not see you." His words carved into Harry, because they felt true. He had always been a thing to the Dursleys, a nuisance, a freak. And now this king was telling him he would be a thing to others, too. "What do I do?" The question escaped him, a plea from a very lost little boy. The Goblin King's expression did not soften, but it shifted. The anger melted into something harder, ruthless pragmatism. "You have power. Raw, wild, unbelievable power. You silenced 3 grown goblin warriors. That is not wand magic. That is something older. Something that speaks to the stone." He glanced at the scar again. "That mark on your brow is a leash, Potter. And a target. If you walk out of this mountain as you are, you will be dead or a puppet within a year." He straightened up, his decision made. The debt must be paid. But a debt to a corpse is a worthless account. Therefore, your survival is now in the interest of Gringotts. He turned to Ragnik. Prepare the sunless suite. The boy stays. Ragnik's eyes widened. My king, a human. In the royal enclave, the clans will see it as an insult. Dagmar's faction will call it weakness. Let them, the king snarled, and the sound echoed off the stone. They attacked my son. They violated the mountain's peace. They will answer to me in steel and fire. This boy, this potter, saved the heir to the sundered throne. He is under my mountain's protection. By the law of debt and the law of hospitality. Any who move against him move against the crown itself. Spread the word. The finality in his voice was absolute. Ragnik bowed, deeply this time, all argument extinguished. The king looked back, at Harry. You will remain here. You will learn. You will understand what you are, and what you hold. You will learn of stone, of silver, of the true history they do not teach in wizard schools. And you will learn to control that power of yours before it burns you out, or draws the wrong kind of attention. He gestured to Griphook. My son will be your guide. Your shadow. Until the debt is settled, his life is tied to your safety. Teach him, Griphook. Show him our ways. And keep him alive. Griphook bowed. Yes, father. The king's burning gaze returned to Harry one last time. Welcome to Gringotts, Harry Potter. You have traded a cupboard for a mountain. See that you do not find it another cage. He turned and ascended to his obsidian throne, melting back into the shadows and shimmering gold light, a monarch rendered in stone and will. Harry stood, shivering, the warm debt chit in one hand, the immense, overwhelming weight of the mountain pressing down on him from all sides. He was not going home. Home was a distant, gray dream. This, the cold, beautiful, brutal, magnificent stone, was his reality now. Griphook touched his arm. Come, he said, his voice quieter now. I will show you your rooms. As Harry turned to follow him, leaving the throne room with its molten river and ancient king, he glanced back one last time. High on his throne, King Ragnarok was not looking at him. He was staring into the depths of the gold river, his granite face etched with a look of deep, calculating contemplation. The flickering light played over the uncut diamonds in his iron crown, making them wink like cold, knowing eyes. The massive bronze doors began to swing shut, separating Harry from the throne room, from the king, from the life he had known. With a final, echoing thud that vibrated through the very stone beneath his feet, they sealed. Harry Potter was inside the mountain. And the mountain, for better or worse, was now inside him. Chapter 3, The Sunless Suite. Griphook led him away from the throne room's oppressive grandeur, down a side passage that felt more like a natural fissure in the rock than a carved corridor. The glowing crystals were fewer here, the shadows deeper and more intimate. The air lost the forge smell, becoming cooler, carrying a faint, clean scent of underground springs. The king's word is law, Griphook said, his voice a low murmur that bounced off the close walls. But not all will be pleased. You heard Ragnik. You are a complication. Harry just nodded, his mind still reeling. The debt chit was a reassuring weight in his fist, a tangible anchor in the whirlpool of impossible things. Where are we going? To the royal enclave, where the direct bloodline lives. Your rooms are there. The sunless suite. It has not housed a guest in a very long time. There was something in Griphook's tone, a flicker of unease he quickly suppressed. They arrived at a seemingly blank wall of dark, water-smoothed stone. Griphook placed his palm flat against it. Runes, the color of heated copper, flared to life under his touch, spiraling outwards in a complex pattern. With a soft grinding sound, a circular section of the wall recessed and slid sideways, revealing an opening. Remember the pattern, Griphook instructed, tracing the air where the runes had been. 3 spirals from the center, the outer ring touched here, and here. Your blood is now keyed to the mountain's deeper ways. Think of the pattern, and will the door to know you. Harry stared, trying to burn the intricate design into his memory. He mimicked Griphook's motion with his own small hand. Nothing happened. It will come, Griphook said, not unkindly. The stone is patient. Come. Beyond the door was not another corridor, but a small, round anteroom. A fountain bubbled in the center, its water clear and silent, pouring from the mouth of a stone griffin into a basin of purple-veined marble. The light here came from gentle, floating globes of milky white crystal that drifted lazily near the ceiling like sleepy jellyfish. Doors of dark, rich wood, mahogany, Harry would later learn, were set into the circular walls. This is the heart of the enclave, Griphook said, gesturing. That door leads to my chambers. That one to my father's private study, do not enter. That one is the library. And this, he stopped before the largest door, which was carved with a scene of a night sky full of unfamiliar constellations, is yours. He pushed it open. Harry stepped inside, and his breath caught again, but for a different reason. After the overwhelming scale of the concourse and the throne room, this was peaceful. It was a suite of rooms, but it felt like a grotto. The walls were a deep, soft gray stone, curved and natural. The ceiling was a dome, and upon it was a breathtaking mural. It showed not a sky, but a subterranean vista, fantastic crystal formations glowing with inner light, bioluminescent fungi forests, and dark, still lakes reflecting star-like deposits of phosphorescent ore. It was a world within the world, beautiful and secret. There was a large bed with a frame of wrought iron shaped like twisting roots, piled with blankets and cushions in deep blues and greens. A sitting area with surprisingly comfortable-looking armchairs upholstered in dark leather. A writing desk of polished black wood. And through an archway, Harry could see a bathing room with a sunken pool of steaming water that smelled faintly of minerals and herbs. But what held his attention were the books. Shelves were carved directly into the stone walls, and they were filled. Not with scrolls, but with proper books, leather-bound, cloth-bound, some looking ancient, others new. Their titles were in English, in runes, in languages he couldn't guess at. The suite was last used by a diplomat, Griphook said, watching him. Many centuries ago. He was a scholar of deep places. The books remain. You may read them. Harry walked slowly to the nearest shelf. His fingers, still grimy from the graveyard, hovered over a spine embossed with gold, a treatise on lunar resonance in subterranean crystal growth. Next to it, the principles of metallurgic alchemy. And another, a history of the Goblin Wizard Wars, volume. This was not a child's room. It was a scholar's den. A prisoner's elegant cell. A sanctuary. He couldn't find the word. It was too big. Too much. It is yours, Griphook said simply. For as long as you need it. The bell pull by the bed summons a steward. They will bring food, clothing, anything you require. Do not wander the enclave alone yet. Wait for me. Harry turned to face him. The little Goblin Prince looked exhausted, the bravado from the graveyard and the throne room wearing thin. The torn sleeve of his fine tunic was a stark reminder of the night's violence. What happens now? Harry asked. Now, Griphook sighed, I must go and be a prince. There will be councils. My father will be interrogating the security lapses. Dagmar's faction will be scattering like beetles under a lifted stone. His black eyes met Harry's. You should rest. Bathe. The water is healing. I will return later. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Harry. He didn't look back. Thank you. Not for the debt. For not looking away. Then he was gone, the door sighing shut behind him. Silence enveloped the sunless suite. It was a deep, profound quiet, broken only by the distant, almost imaginary trickle of the fountain in the anteroom. Harry stood in the center of the lavish, alien room, clutching his silver coin, dressed in ruined pajamas. He was alone, truly alone, for the first time since the graveyard. The events of the last few hours crashed over him like a physical wave. The terror of the chase. The blinding, impossible power. The whirlwind journey. The blind scribes. The terrifying king. The weight of a debt he didn't understand. A shudder ran through him, starting deep in his core and radiating outwards until his teeth chattered. The fear, held back by adrenaline and sheer confusion, finally broke free. He stumbled to the vast bed, climbed onto it, and buried his face in a pillow that smelled of lavender and stone dust. He did not cry. The Dursleys had taught him the futility of tears. But he shook, curled into a tight ball, as the silence of the mountain pressed in on him. He was 6 years old, and he was in a palace under the earth, and he would never see his cupboard again. The thought should have been a relief. Instead, it was a new kind of terror. The devil you know. Exhaustion, deeper than any Dudley-induced chase had ever caused, finally pulled him under. He fell into a sleep as black and dreamless as the deepest mine shaft. He awoke to the smell of food. It was a rich, savory, unfamiliar aroma, roasted meat, herbs, something earthy like mushrooms, and the warm, comforting scent of fresh bread. Harry's stomach growled fiercely, a painful cramp reminding him he hadn't eaten since a slice of stale toast the previous afternoon. Sitting up, he saw a low table near the fireplace which held a crackling, blue-flamed fire that gave no smoke had been laid with a meal. A covered silver platter, a bowl of soup, a small loaf of dark bread, a goblet of what looked like milk. There was no one in the room. He slid off the bed. His pajamas were stiff with dried grass and dirt. He felt grimy all over. Remembering Griphook's words, he went to the bathing room. The pool was larger than it had first seemed, stepped like a miniature lagoon. The water was hot and clear. He shed his filthy clothes, leaving them in a sad heap on the smooth floor, and lowered himself in. The heat was a balm, soaking into his sore muscles, washing away the chill of the graveyard and the fear. The mineral scent was soothing. For several long minutes, he just sat on the underwater ledge, watching the faint steam rise. Clean, and feeling more human, he climbed out. A stack of folded clothes waited on a stone bench, not his pajamas. There were simple, well-made trousers of a soft, dark gray fabric, a green tunic that laced up the front, underwear, and socks. They fit him better than any of Dudley's cast-offs ever had. He returned to the main room and attacked the food. It was incredible. The meat was tender and flavorful, the gravy rich, the mushrooms buttery, the bread dense and nutty. The milk was sweet and cold. He ate until he thought he might be sick, then forced himself to slow down, savoring each bite. No one had ever given him food like this. Food made just for him. As he ate, his eyes wandered the room, landing again on the books. Curiosity, a sensation long buried under survival instinct, began to stir. He finished his meal, took the goblet of milk, and walked to the shelves. He pulled out the volume on the Goblin Wizard Wars. It was heavy. He carried it to one of the armchairs by the fire, curled up, and opened it. The text was dense, the language formal and old-fashioned. But he could read it. He had always been a good reader, escaping into books from the school library whenever he could. This was different. This was not a story about talking animals or clever children. This was history. His history, apparently. He read about the first conflicts over wand-making rights. About goblin-made armor that could repel spells, and wizard spells that could melt stone. He read about broken treaties, about the Goblin Rebellion of 1612, put down by wizards with brutal efficiency. He read about the founding of Gringotts as a neutral ground, a bastion of financial sovereignty, and the unspoken resentment that simmered beneath every transaction. The wizard perspective, when mentioned, was dismissive. The creatures, while clever, lacked the magical sophistication for true governance. The goblin author, whose name was given as Borin Ironheart, wrote with a cold, razor-sharp fury. They call us creatures. They take the works of our forges, the songs of our smiths, and call it mere craftsmanship, denying the magic in our blood, in our hands that shape the earth's bones. They break their own wizard-made laws when it suits them, yet hold us to accounts penned in their favor. Asterisk. Harry read until his eyes grew heavy again, the words blurring. He learned that goblin magic was different. It was woven into craftsmanship, into runes carved with intent, into the very metal they forged. A goblin-forged blade would never lose its edge. A goblin-locked vault could not be Alahomorid. Their power was in permanence, in binding, in things made to last. Wizard magic, by contrast, was described as ephemeral will, powerful but fleeting, requiring a focus like a wand, leaving no permanent mark on the world unless anchored by ritual or terrible sacrifice. He thought of the green light that had unmade the traitors' weapons. Had that been wizard magic? It hadn't felt fleeting. It had felt final. The door to the suite opened quietly. Harry started, the book slipping from his lap. Griphook entered. He had changed into a new tunic, this one of dark blue, and looked marginally less weary. "You are reading Ironheart," he observed, coming to stand by the fire. "A blunt historian, but an honest one. Is it true?" Harry asked, his voice quiet. "All of it. True from our side of the mountain," Griphook said, picking up the book and glancing at the open page. "The wizards have their own books. Their truth is smoother, softer. It forgets the sharp edges." He put the book down. "Come. My father wishes to see you. Not in the throne room. In his study." A fresh thread of anxiety wound through Harry's stomach. He followed Griphook out of the suite, through the quiet anteroom, and to the door the prince had warned him about. This door was plain, unmarked iron. Griphook knocked twice, sharply. "Enter." The king's voice was muffled but clear. The study was a shock after the suite's serene beauty. It was chaos given order. It was an archive, a laboratory, and a war room. Parchments and maps covered every flat surface. Globes not of the world, but of geological strata and magical ley lines, floated in brackets. Cases held not books, but samples of ore, crystals, and strange, preserved deep creatures in jars. The air smelled of leather, ink, ozone, and the faint, acrid tang of recently tested magic. King Ragnarok stood before a large table, upon which was spread a massive, incredibly detailed map of London, but a London Harry barely recognized. Streets were overlaid with shimmering magical avenues. Buildings like the Ministry of Magic and St. Mungo's glowed. And dominating the center, a perfect, intricate model of Gringotts itself, with tiny, moving carts on tracks running through its depths. He was not wearing his crown. In simple black, his hair loose around his shoulders, he looked more like a scholar or a general than a king. But the power was still there, coiled and ready. "Sit," he said, not looking up from the map. He gestured to two plain wooden chairs. Harry sat, perching on the edge. Griphook took the other chair, his posture straight. The king finally looked up, his burnt gold eyes pinning Harry. "You have rested. You have eaten. Good. The body must be fortified for the mind's work." He picked up a long, thin brass pointer and tapped it on the Gringotts model. "You are here. In the heart. The wizarding world," he swept the pointer over the glowing map of London, "is there. They do not know you are here. They believe you to be safe, locked away with your non-magical relatives, hidden by Albus Dumbledore's clever little spell." He leaned on the table, the wood groaning. "This is an advantage. Ignorance is a shield, if you know how to hold it. But it will not last. You are a famous child, Harry Potter. The boy who lived. When you eventually appear in their world, they will dissect your every word, your every action. They will have expectations, plans for you." Harry swallowed. What did they expect? "A hero," the king said, his lip curling. "A symbol. A well-mannered, grateful wizard who will defeat the next Dark Lord and uphold their comfortable, prejudiced world. They expect you to be moldable. Unformed clay, ready for their hands." He straightened up, pacing slowly around the table. "You have already broken their first mold. You are not where you should be. You have power they cannot classify. And you have a connection to Gringotts." He stopped, looking directly at Harry. "This connection is a weapon. And a vulnerability. We must decide what to forge from it." He picked up a lump of rough, dark ore from a case and placed it on the map, right over Privet Drive. "This is you now. Raw potential. Full of impurities. Dangerous to handle." He then placed a smooth, perfect ingot of silver next to it. "This is what the wizarding world wants. Shiny, standard, easily traded. Worth is dictated by them." Finally, he picked up a small, finished piece, a delicate, lethal-looking dagger with a blade of black steel and a hilt wrapped in silver wire. "This is what you could be. A tool of specific purpose. Sharp, enduring, with a will of its own. Forged in goblin fire, but the metal is still yours." Harry stared at the three objects. The rough ore, the bland ingot, the beautiful, dangerous dagger. The metaphor was clear, even to a 6-year-old who had just learned what a metaphor was. "I don't want to be a tool," he whispered. The king's eyes gleamed. "Good. Then do not be one. Be the smith. But to be a smith, you must first understand the fire, the hammer, and the metal." He pointed the brass pointer at Harry's chest. "Your magic is the fire. Wild. Your will is the hammer. Untrained. Your soul, for lack of a less dramatic word, is the metal. We will teach you control. We will teach you craft. Not wand waving. Something deeper. The magic of intent. The power of binding. The strength of the earth." "Why?" The question burst from Harry. "Why would you teach me? I'm a wizard. You hate wizards." "I do not hate wizards," the king corrected, his voice dangerously calm. "I despise their arrogance. I loathe their hypocrisy. I oppose their political dominance. But you are a child. You are also a life debtor to my house. Your well-being is now, annoyingly, tied to our honor. More than that," he paused, his gaze turning inward for a moment. "The world is a scale, Potter. It balances. For centuries, the weight has been on the wizard's side. A new weight has fallen onto our side of the scale. I would be a poor king if I did not assess how best to use that weight to rebalance the accounts. It was not a warm, altruistic reason. It was a cold, political, goblin reason. In a strange way, Harry found it more honest than any false kindness the Dursleys had never offered. "What's first?" Harry asked, his voice firmer. "First," the king said, a hint of approval in his eyes, "we see what you are made of. Griphook will take you to the Foundry Flats. To the echoing cavern. You will listen to the stone. And you will try to make it answer." An hour later, Harry stood in a place that made the throne room seem cozy. The Foundry Flats were a vast, open cavern, so wide the far wall was a haze of heat shimmer and distant orange glow. The ceiling was a forest of stone icicles hundreds of feet long. Below, it was an industrial hellscape of beauty and power. Dozens of forges, each the size of a house, blazed with multi-colored fires, blue, white, green, violet. The clang of hammers was a constant, deafening symphony, punctuated by the hiss of white-hot metal being quenched and the guttural chanting of work songs and gobbledygook. Goblins, stripped to the waist and gleaming with sweat, worked in rhythmic teams, their muscles corded, their focus absolute. They were shaping everything from delicate filigree to enormous, rune-covered armor plates. The air was blisteringly hot and thick with the smells of burning coal, ozone, and molten metal. Harry felt tiny, insignificant, a speck of dust in a cathedral of industry. Griphook led him along a high gantry that overlooked the chaos, finally stopping at a small, arched opening in the cavern wall. "In here, the echoing cavern. It is quiet." They stepped through, and the wall of sound from the forges dropped to a distant, muffled thunder. This cavern was small, round, and utterly dark. As Harry's eyes adjusted, he saw why it was named. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in millions of tiny, needle-like crystals. They did not glow, but they caught and reflected the faintest light in a million, fractured sparkles. "Sit," Griphook instructed, settling himself cross-legged on the smooth floor in the center. Harry copied him. "Close your eyes," Griphook said, his voice taking on a low, resonant quality. "Do not listen with your ears. Listen with the place behind your eyes. Where your magic lives. The stone here is old. It remembers. It echoes with everything that has happened in the mountain. Feel for the echo." Harry closed his eyes. The dark behind his lids was complete. At first, all he was aware of was his own breathing, the residual roar in his ears from the forges, the hard floor under him. He tried to reach for that place behind his eyes. The place where the green light had come from. It felt quiet now, dormant, just a faint, warm thrum, like a sleeping animal. Listen to the stone. Asterisk. He imagined his magic not as a thing inside him, but as a hand, reaching out, touching the crystal-studded floor. Nothing. He tried again, straining. A headache began to pulse behind his scar. "Do not force it," Griphook murmured. "You are not pulling. You are opening a door. A very small door. Let the sound find its way in." Harry took a deep breath, trying to let go of the effort. He stopped trying to listen, and just existed in the dark, in the quiet. And then, he heard it. Not a sound. A vibration. A deep, slow, resonant hum, so low it was more a feeling in his bones than a noise. It was the mountain's heartbeat. The pressure of countless tons of rock. The memory of continental shifts from eons past. Beneath that, higher, sharper notes, the clang-clang-clang of a hammer from centuries ago, the ghost of a forge fire, the whisper of a goblin smith's final breath as he sealed a masterpiece. Echoes of creation. Echoes of loss. He gasped, his eyes flying open. The crystals on the walls seemed to pulse faintly in time with the hum. "You heard it," Griphook said, not a question. Harry nodded, speechless. "Good. That is the first lesson. The stone has a voice. All things do. Metal, water, fire. Magic is the art of listening, and then, of speaking back." Griphook held out his hand, palm down, hovering an inch above the floor. He closed his eyes. A single, pure, clear note rang out, like a silver bell being struck. One of the tiny crystals near his hand glowed with a soft white light for a second before fading. "Your turn," Griphook said. "Do not command. Ask. A small ask. Ask a crystal to shine." Harry placed his own small hand over the floor. He thought of the hum, the deep song of the mountain. He tried to match his own internal hum to it. He focused on a single, nearby crystal cluster, picturing it holding light, just for a moment. Please. Asterisk. He didn't say it aloud. He pushed the request, the polite, hopeful ask, out through his palm, through the warm place behind his scar. A spark. A tiny, weak, yellowish spark flickered in the heart of the crystal. It lasted less than a second before winking out. But it had happened. Harry stared at his hand, then at Griphook, a wild, incredulous hope blooming in his chest. He had done magic. On purpose. Quiet, gentle magic. Not the explosive, fearful burst from the graveyard. This was his. Griphook's sharp teeth appeared in what might have been a smile. The stone answers a polite request more readily than a shouted order. Remember that. Power is not always about being loudest. For the next hour, Harry practiced. His successes were few and faint, a brief glow here, a soft chime there. Each one felt like a victory. Each failure was met not with impatience from Griphook, but with a calm, again. The stone is patient. By the time they left the echoing cavern, Harry was mentally exhausted but thrumming with a new kind of energy. The deafening clamor of the Foundry Flats felt different now, not just noise, but a chorus, a mighty song of making. As they walked back along the gantry, a group of goblin workers near a large, violet-flamed forge looked up from their work. They were not the sleek bankers or the fierce guards. These were smiths, powerful and soot-stained. Their eyes tracked Harry with a different kind of intensity, not hostile curiosity, but deep, measuring assessment. One of them, a massive goblin with a scar running from his hairline to his jaw, nodded slowly at Griphook, a gesture of respect. Then his dark eyes locked with Harry's. He hefted his hammer, which was as long as Harry was tall, and brought it down on a glowing piece of metal on his anvil. Clang. Asterisk. The sound was not just impact. It was a statement, a challenge, a question. The hammer rose and fell again, each strike ringing through the hot air, a rhythm that seemed to say, "Can you bear the heat, little human? Can you stand the hammer's song?" Asterisk. Harry didn't look away. He met the smith's gaze, the echoes of the quiet cavern still singing in his bones. He didn't know the answer. But for the first time in his life, he wanted to find out. He gave a small, solemn nod back. The smith's lips twitched. He returned to his work, the clang 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 becoming part of the great symphony once more. Griphook, who had watched the exchange in silence, placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "Come," he said. "You have listened enough for one day. Tomorrow, we begin to learn how to speak." They made their way back towards the quiet enclave, leaving the roaring forges behind. But the echo of the hammers followed Harry, a new heartbeat alongside the mountain's deep, old hum. That night, back in the sunless suite, Harry lay in the large, comfortable bed, staring up at the painted subterranean sky. The silver det chit was on the bedside table, gleaming in the low light of the floating crystals. He thought of the Dursleys. Were they looking for him? Had they called the police? Did they even care, or were they just relieved the freak was gone? The thought should have hurt more. It just felt distant. Like a story about someone else. He thought of the green light, the cage, the terrifying king, the blind scribes, the feel of the stone song. He was Harry Potter. He lived in a mountain. He owed a life debt to a Goblin Prince. And he had asked a crystal to shine, and it had. It was impossible. It was terrifying. But as he closed his eyes, the deep, resonant hum of the mountain cradled him, a lullaby of stone and time. And for the first time he could remember, Harry Potter did not feel alone in the dark. He felt the mountain around him, vast and ancient and real. And somewhere, in the depths below the royal enclave, in a heavily warded cell, a goblin named Dagmar listened to reports from his remaining loyalists. His red eyes glinted with a fury that had curdled into something colder, more calculating. The human child was under the king's protection. The debt was sealed. A direct move was impossible. But mountains had cracks. Kingdoms had weaknesses. And even the hardest stone could be shattered, if one found the right fault line. He looked at a rough sketch brought to him by a terrified, low-level clerk, a sketch of the sunless suite's layout, showing the bathing pool, the bookcases, the bed by the far wall. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across Dagmar's face. The human child had to bathe. He had to sleep. And water, precious, necessary water, could come from many places in a mountain. Some pipes were older than others. Some valves were forgotten. And a whisper of a certain contactless, odorless, slow-acting poison from the deep fungal forests, a poison that mimicked a weak human heart giving out, such a thing might be acquired. For a price. The king's protection was a shield. But shields did not stop what was already inside. Chapter 4, The Taste of Poison. The rhythm of the mountain was not like the sun. It was measured in shifts, in the distant, eternal gong that marked the changing of the guard, in the ebb and flow of heat from the forges. Harry learned to tell time by the quality of the silence in the enclave, the deep, sleeping quiet, the bustling murmur of the stewards at mealtimes, the occasional, sharp echo of Griphook being summoned to his father. 3 days had passed in a blur of strange, quiet intensity. Mornings were for the echoing cavern. With Griphook as his patient, demanding tutor, Harry practiced listening. He learned to differentiate between the deep bedrock hum and the sharper, more recent echoes, the ghost of a conversation from yesterday, the lingering warmth of a particular forge's magic. He managed, after countless attempts, to make a small cluster of crystals glow a steady, soft blue for almost a full minute. The feeling of it, a gentle, sustained push of will, like holding a note in a song, was intoxicating. Afternoons were different. Griphook, true to his word as both prince and guide, began Harry's education in the true history they do not teach in wizard schools. They sat in the suite's library, or in a small, secluded alcove off the royal enclave's anteroom, and Griphook talked. He spoke not from books, but from memory, from stories passed down in the deep clans. He told Harry about the founding of Gringotts, not as a neutral bank, but as a fortress sanctuary after a particularly brutal wizard purge. They called it the Goblin Relocation Act, Griphook said, his voice flat. We called it the theft of the deep holds. They wanted the silver veins under our homes. So they made a law, and then they enforced it with fire. He spoke of wand making, the great, festering wound. They say we cannot use wands. A lie. We choose not to. Their wands are temporary. They break. They change allegiance. They are tools of influence, not creation. Our magic is in the making. To take a wand would be to admit their way is superior. We will never admit that. Harry listened, absorbing it all. It was a history of grievance, of pride, of a people perpetually on the defensive, honing their skills and their resentment into something as sharp and enduring as the blades they forged. He also learned about the life debt. It was not, as he had vaguely imagined, a simple, I owe you one. It was a sacred, magical contract. By saving Griphook, Harry had, in the eyes of Goblin law, taken the prince's potential future, all his actions, his reign, his descendants, into his stewardship. Until Harry released him, or called upon him to fulfill a task of equal value to a royal life, Griphook's fate was entwined with his. It was why the king was so furious, yet so pragmatic. The debt was a chain, but it bound their fortunes together. On the 4th day, after another morning of quiet concentration in the cavern, Harry returned to the sunless suite for lunch. A new stew was waiting, this one thick with barley and strange, smoky-tasting roots. He ate hungrily, the mental exertion always leaving him ravenous. As he finished, a quiet, elderly goblin steward with kind, clouded eyes entered to clear the tray. The young master is adjusting to the mountain's fare. The steward asked, his voice a soft rustle. It's good, Harry said politely. Different. The water helps, the steward said, gesturing to the half-full goblet. From the purest deep springs. It fortifies the blood against the stone damp. He collected the dishes and gave a shallow bow. Prince Griphook sends word. He is detained in the foundry flats. An inspection of a new ore shipment. He suggests you spend the afternoon in the suite's library. There is a volume on foundational runes he has set aside for you. Thank you, Harry said. The steward left, and Harry wandered to the bathing room. The intense mental focus always left him feeling grimy in a way dirt never did. The sunken pool steamed invitingly. He shed his clothes and slipped into the hot, mineral-rich water with a sigh, letting the heat soak into his bones. He relaxed, leaning his head back against the smooth stone edge, closing his eyes. The deep hum of the mountain was a constant presence now, a comfort. He could feel it here, vibrating gently through the water. He must have dozed, because the next thing he knew, he was swallowing a mouthful of water as he jerked awake. He coughed, blinking. The water tasted odd. Not the usual clean, stony mineral flavor. There was a faint, almost imperceptible bitterness underneath, like the smell of old pennies and something else, something dank, like the moldering leaves at the bottom of the Dursleys' garden in autumn. He frowned, spitting into the water. Probably just his imagination, a new mineral from a different spring. But as he sat there, the warmth of the bath seemed to turn cloying. A dull, heavy ache began to pulse behind his eyes, not the sharp pain of his scar, but a deeper, throbbing discomfort. His stomach, full of stew, churned unpleasantly. He climbed out of the pool, wrapping himself in a thick, soft towel. The room tilted slightly. He steadied himself against the wall, his breath coming a little faster. He felt weak, dizzy. The beautiful, painted dome of the suite's ceiling seemed to swirl above him when he walked back into the main room. Just tired, he told himself. Too much magic. Asterisk. He went to the bed and lay down, pulling the blankets over him. A chill was seeping into his limbs, despite the mountain's constant, mild warmth. He shivered, curling into a ball. The throb behind his eyes grew, spreading down his neck. His heart was beating strangely, a fast, frantic flutter, then a slow, heavy thump that felt like it shook his whole chest. Panic, cold and slick, began to cut through the fog. This wasn't right. This wasn't magic exhaustion. This was something else. He thought of the bitter water. The kind old steward's words, it fortifies the blood. Asterisk. A terrible, clear thought sliced into his mind, poison. Asterisk. The Dursleys had never bothered to poison him. Neglect was easier. But here, he was a complication. An insult. Dagmar's faction. The king had said they would see his presence as weakness. He tried to sit up. The room spun violently. A wave of nausea rolled over him, hot and sour. He collapsed back onto the pillows, his vision spotting with dark blooms. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. His heart did that awful stutter again, a pause that felt like falling into a hole. He was going to die. Here, in this beautiful, sunless room, far from anyone who cared. Griphook was in the Foundry Flats. The king was in his war room. The kind steward was gone. Despair, black and total, threatened to swallow him. He was 6 years old. He didn't want to die in the dark again. His hand flailed out, knocking the silver det chit from the bedside table. It landed on the stone floor with a dull clink. Break it. I will come. Asterisk. Griphook's words. But he couldn't reach it. He couldn't move. The strength was leaching from his body like water into sand. Number. Asterisk. The word was a silent scream inside his skull. Not again. Not after the cupboard. Not after finding the mountain, the magic, the strange, fierce friendship. He wouldn't let them take it. He wouldn't die from a coward's trick, from something in the water. Anger surged, cutting through the paralysis of fear. It wasn't the wild, explosive rage of the graveyard. This was colder, sharper, a focused, desperate will to live. He couldn't reach the coin. He couldn't call for help. But he could listen. With the last of his conscious will, he slammed his awareness inward, away from the failing body, away from the spinning room. He reached for the warm, humming place behind his scar, the place where his magic lived. It felt sluggish, tainted by the same damp, bitter cold invading his veins. He pushed past it. He reached deeper, down to where his magic met the echo of the mountain song he had been learning. He didn't try to speak. He couldn't. He did the only thing he could. He screamed. Not with his voice. With his magic. A silent, raw, desperate pulse of terror and fury and pure, undiluted need. It was not a spell. It was a distress beacon, fired directly into the stone he lay upon, into the bones of the mountain itself. Help me. Asterisk. The pulse shot out from him. He felt it go, a ripple in a silent pond. It traveled through the bed frame, into the floor, into the deep, singing rock. And the mountain, which had been humming its old, patient song, heard. In the echoing cavern, a mile away, every crystal on the walls and ceiling shattered simultaneously with a sound like 1,000 chimes breaking. In the Foundry Flats, the violet flame of the massive scarred smith's forge guttered and died as if snuffed by a giant's breath. Every anvil rang with a single, discordant, deafening note that was not struck by any hammer. And in the royal study, King Ragnarok, who was reviewing a report on ore yields, suddenly clutched the edge of his table. The obsidian paperweight on his desk cracked clean in two. A deep, resonant boom, felt more than heard, rolled through the stone under his feet. He froze, his burnt gold eyes widening in recognition. Not an attack. A cry woven into the mountain's own magic. Griphook. He roared, his voice echoing through the enclave's speaking tubes. To the sunless suite. Now. Griphook was already running. He had felt it too, a wrench in his very core, a silent, psychic shriek that resonated with the life-debt bond. He burst out of a side tunnel into the enclave anteroom, skidding on the smooth stone, and slammed his palm against the suite's door. It flew open. The scene inside stole the breath from his lungs. Harry was a small, convulsing lump in the center of the vast bed. His skin was a horrible, waxy gray. His lips were tinged blue. Each breath was a terrible, wet hitch. His green eyes were open, staring at the painted ceiling but seeing nothing, glazed with pain and encroaching darkness. Harry. Griphook scrambled onto the bed, his cool, clever hands going to Harry's throat, finding a pulse that was a weak, erratic flutter. He leaned close, sniffed. His sharp senses caught it, the faint, telltale dank bitterness on Harry's breath, in the damp air around him. Fungal gloom. A deep forest poison. Slow. Insidious. Meant to mimic natural failure. Rage, white-hot and absolute, flashed through Griphook. But it was ice-cold by the time it reached his voice. Poison. In the water. The bathing pool. King Ragnarok stormed into the room a second later, followed by 2 guards and the elderly steward, who was wringing his hands in terror. The king took in the scene in an instant. His face, usually granite, turned to volcanic fury. "You," he snarled at the steward. The old goblin flinched. "The water. Who accessed the springs? Who bypassed the purification runes? My king, I do not know. The feeds are sealed. I drew his bath myself from the royal cistern. It was pure. It is not pure now." The king was at the bathing room door in 2 strides. He dipped a finger into the still steaming pool, brought it to his tongue, and spat, a vicious, hacking sound. Fungal gloom. Dagmar's signature. He always had a taste for the subtle rot. He turned back, his eyes blazing. "Guards. Lock down the enclave. No one in or out. Find the contamination point. Trace it back. I want the pipe, the valve, the hand that turned it. Bring them to me alive." The guards saluted and vanished. The king approached the bed. His anger was now a focused, lethal thing. He looked down at Harry's small, failing form, at his son's frantic hands trying to find a way to help. "He is too far gone for most antidotes," the king said, his voice low. "The gloom is in his blood. It must be purged. But his human body is weak. A cleansing would kill him as surely as the poison. There has to be something." Griphook's voice broke. "The debt. He cannot die like this." "The debt," the king murmured, his eyes narrowing. He stared at Harry's ashen face, at the lightning scar standing out lividly against the gray skin. "The debt is a binding. A 2-way channel." A dangerous, desperate idea formed in his mind. His magic cried out. The mountain answered. But his body is too frail to channel the power needed to burn the poison out. He looked at his son. "You are bound to him. Your life is in his trust. Can the channel flow the other way?" Griphook stared, comprehension dawning. "You mean, give him my strength. But father, I'm not a healer. My magic is of earth and metal, not flesh." "We are not healing flesh," the king said, seizing Griphook's shoulders. "We are fueling a furnace. His own magic, that wild, raw power, it is the only thing that can scour this filth from his veins. But it needs fuel. It needs a catalyst. A source of stable, earth-born power to ignite it." He locked eyes with his son. "You are of the mountain's royal blood. Your magic is as much a part of this stone as the iron in its heart. You must give him a spark. Light the fire within him, and let his own magic do the rest." "It could kill us both," Griphook whispered. "If his magic rejects it, or burns out of control. He is dying now." The king's roar shook the room. "This is not a choice from a book of protocols, boy. This is a king's command, and a debtor's duty. Do you honor the life debt, or do you let it become a death mark?" Griphook looked back at Harry. The boy's chest was barely moving. The light in those famous green eyes was guttering, like a candle in a draft. He made his decision. He climbed fully onto the bed, sitting cross-legged, and lifted Harry's limp, cold upper body into his lap. He arranged the small, frail form so Harry's back was against his chest. He placed one hand flat over Harry's heart. With the other, he pressed his palm against Harry's forehead, right on the lightning scar. "Do it," Griphook said, his voice steady now. "Tell me how." The king placed his own broad, powerful hands over Griphook's. "Do not push your magic into him. That is invasion. It will be fought. You must open a gate. A conduit. Let your magic sing to his. The song of the mountain." The song of the deep dweller blood. Call to the power inside him. Offer it a shape, a foundation. Let it borrow your strength. Griphook closed his eyes. He shut out the terror, the urgency. He reached for his own core, for the deep, resonant, steady magic that was his birthright. He thought of the echoing cavern. He thought of the hammer's song in the forges. He thought of the patient, immutable weight of the stone above them. He began to hum. It was a low vibration, more felt than heard, a goblin lullaby older than the bank itself. A song of stone and root and deep, unyielding time. He poured that feeling, that essence, down his arms, through his hands, into the points of contact with Harry. He did not force it. He offered it. A steady, unwavering note in the chaos. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Harry remained a cold, dying weight in his arms. Then, under Griphook's palm, the lightning scar grew warm. Not the feverish heat of sickness. A cleaner, sharper warmth. A spark. Deep within Harry's still form, in the dark place where the poison was spreading its dank chill, something stirred. The raw, wild power that had exploded in the graveyard, that had cried out to the mountain, heard a new song. A strong, stable, grounding song. A song that promised not to control it, but to hold it steady. It reached for the song. A jolt went through both of them. Griphook gasped as he felt a torrent of energy, chaotic, brilliant, and terrifying, brush against his own. It was like touching a lightning bolt. It burned. It hungered. Yes, Griphook thought, pouring more of his steady hum into the connection. Here, take what you need. Burn clean. Harry's magic seemed to understand. It did not absorb Griphook's power. It used it as a kind of bellows. Griphook's earth magic became the stable hearth. Harry's wild power became the raging fire. Inside Harry, a silent, green conflagration ignited. Griphook could see it with his mind's eye, a wave of brilliant, emerald light, tinged with gold, sweeping through Harry's bloodstream. Where the dank, gray tendrils of the fungal gloom poison touched it, they vaporized, turning to harmless, dark smoke that was expelled from Harry's pores in a faint, bitter-smelling mist. The process was not gentle. Harry's small body arched off the bed, a silent scream locked in his throat. His skin flushed from deathly gray to a feverish, burning red. Steam rose from his hair. The blankets beneath him smoldered. Hold him, the king commanded, his own hands now braced on Griphook's shoulders, adding his immense will to the conduit, stabilizing the flow. The fire must burn all of it. Hold. Griphook held. He sang his mountain song through the pain, through the terrifying feedback of raw power scalding his own senses. He held as Harry's. Magic scoured its own house clean. The emerald fire reached Harry's heart. The erratic, fluttering beat ceased, then hammered once, a single, colossal thump that echoed in the quiet room. Then it settled into a strong, steady, furious rhythm. It reached his brain. The glazed eyes flew wide, and for a second they blazed with pure, undiluted green light, like paradots held to the sun. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The connection snapped. Griphook was thrown back, landing hard on the floor, gasping, his hands tingling as if he'd grasped live wires. The king staggered back a step, breathing heavily. On the bed, Harry collapsed, boneless. But the gray was gone. The blue tinge had vanished. His skin was pale, but it was a healthy, living pallor, slick with sweat. His chest rose and fell in deep, even, sleeping breaths. The room was silent, save for the crackle of the blue-flamed fire and their ragged breathing. The air smelled of ozone, burned linen, and the faint, fading trace of dank fungus. Slowly, Harry's eyes fluttered open. They were his own eyes again, bright, confused green. He blinked, looking around the room, at the ceiling, then at Griphook on the floor, and the king standing over them both. What? His voice was a dry croak. What happened? I felt cold, then really hot. Griphook pushed himself up, his limbs trembling with exhaustion and relief. He climbed back onto the bed, looking Harry over with a healer's critical eye. You were poisoned. By our enemies. You called for help. And then you burned the poison out. I did. With my son's life as your kindling, the king said, his voice gravelly. He looked at Harry with a new, profound intensity. There was no longer just calculation in his gaze. There was a spark of something like awe, and a deep, grim respect. You did not just cry out, Potter. You sang a death knell to the poison in a key only pure power can reach. And you used a Goblin Prince's magic to do it without tearing yourself apart. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate movement. They have no idea what they have lost. What they have left festering in the dark. One of the guards reappeared at the door, his armor scored and smoky. My king, we found the point of contamination. A forgotten maintenance valve in the old aqueduct, recently tampered with. The goblin who did it was found in his quarters. He had taken his own life with a blade. Dagmar's mark was on a note hidden in his mattress. The king's face hardened into something truly terrifying. Dagmar, he breathed. He hides behind the dead. He thinks this is a game of shadows. He turned from the bed, his robe swirling. This ends now. The enclave lockdown stands. No one leaves. Prepare the deep wardens. We are going hunting in the lower galleries. We will root out this infection from our stone, vein by vein. He paused at the door, looking back at the two boys on the bed. Griphook, stay with him. Do not leave his side. The debt bond is stronger now. You have tasted each other's magic. Use that. If he so much as sneezes oddly, you will know. His burning eyes settled on Harry. Rest, Potter. You have fought your first war in the mountain. It will not be your last. He left, the door closing with a sound of finality. Harry lay back, exhausted to his very soul, but clean. The horrible, heavy cold was gone. In its place was a new, humming warmth, part his own magic, settled now but thrumming with potential, and part something else, a steady, earthy resonance that felt like Griphook, like the echo of the mountain's song. He looked at the Goblin Prince, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. You gave me your magic. I gave you a tune, Griphook corrected softly, slumping against the headboard. You sang the song. He was silent for a long moment. When you cried out, the mountain heard you, Harry. I felt it. The stones answered you. No wizard can do that. No goblin, either, not like that. It was like you were part of it. Harry remembered the pulse, the desperate scream into the stone. He remembered the mountain's answering hum, magnified, focused, carrying his plea. He looked at his own small hands. They looked the same, but they didn't feel the same. They felt connected. To the bed, to the floor, to the deep, endless rock below. He had almost died, but he hadn't. He had been saved by the very bond his enemies had tried to exploit. And in fighting back, he had changed. He had touched something deeper. Griphook reached out and picked up the silver debt chit from where it had fallen on the floor. He pressed it back into Harry's hand, closing his fingers around it. Do not lose this, and do not be without it again. He met Harry's eyes, and his black gaze was fierce. The next time you need help, do not wait until you cannot move. Break it. I am your shadow. That is the debt. That is my choice. Harry nodded, his throat tight. He clutched the warm metal. Outside the sunless suite, in the halls of the mountain, a different kind of silence fell. Not the quiet of peace, but the ominous hush before a storm. The deep wardens, the king's most elite and ruthless guards, were mobilizing. The lower galleries, a maze of old mines and abandoned vaults where dissent festered, were about to be scoured with fire and steel. Dagmar had meant to kill a human child with subtle rot. He had instead forged something harder. He had reminded a king of his wrath. And he had shown a lost boy that he had a home to fight for, and a friend who would sing with him in the dark. Harry closed his eyes, the echoes of the green, cleansing fire still dancing behind his lids. He was tired, but he was alive, and somewhere in the dark, deep cracks of the mountain, a traitor goblin who had thought himself safe heard the first, deliberate, marching footsteps echoing down from above, and knew his game of shadows was over. The mountain was awake, and it was angry. Chapter 5, The Deep Wardens. Silence in the mountain was a living thing. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the presence of a held breath. Harry felt it in the stone beneath his bed, a taut vibration that had replaced the usual deep, placid hum. The great forges of the flats had fallen quiet. The distant, melodic clang of hammers was gone. The only sounds in the sunless suite were the crackle of the blue-flamed fire and Griphook's steady, watchful breathing from the chair he had drawn up to the bedside. Harry slept, but it was a thin, restless sleep, haunted by dreams of dank water and a cold that seeped into his marrow. Each time he jerked awake, gasping, Griphook was there, a silent, dark-eyed sentinel. They are hunting, Griphook said quietly after the third time, his voice cutting through the gloom. He wasn't looking at Harry, but at the door, as if he could see through it, down into the mountain's bowels. The deep wardens. My father's blade hand. When they are loosed, the stone itself weeps. What will they do? Harry asked, his own voice raspy. His throat still felt scraped raw, though the healing warmth circulating in him had chased the last of the poison's vestiges away. What is necessary? Griphook said, and there was no child left in his tone, only the cold pragmatism of a prince. They will find Dagmar's nest. They will break it. There will be no trials. No pleas for mercy. This is not a wizard's court. This is the law of the deep. An attack on the royal blood is an attack on the mountain. The answer is eradication. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Harry thought of the 3 traitors in the graveyard, disarmed and terrified. This would be different. This would be thorough. He shivered, pulling the blankets tighter. He should be horrified. A part of him was, a small, soft part that still remembered being weak and afraid in a cupboard. But a larger, newer part, the part that had tasted poison and fought back with fire, understood. The Dursleys' cruelty had been a slow, suffocating constant. This was a swift, clean amputation. To prevent the rot from spreading. Will he be okay? Harry asked, the question surprising him. Griphook glanced at him, a flicker of surprise in his own black eyes. He is the king. The mountain is in his blood. He is safest when he is wrath itself. He paused. But thank you for asking. Hours trickled by, marked only by the slow drift of the floating crystal lights. A steward brought food, a simple, clear broth and plain bread. Griphook tasted it first, a deliberate, obvious gesture, before letting Harry eat. The message was clear. Trust was now a finite commodity, to be tested at every turn. Harry was sipping the broth when the first tremor came. It was not loud. It was a deep, subsonic thump that traveled up through the legs of the bed, into his spine. The liquid in his goblet shivered, forming perfect, concentric rings. The crystals in the chandelier tinkled softly. Griphook went perfectly still, his head cocked like a bird listening for a worm in the earth. Another thump. Closer. Or deeper. It was hard to tell. Then, a sound that was not a tremor. A faint, distant, echoing scream. It was cut off abruptly. Harry froze, the spoon halfway to his mouth. The sound hadn't been one of pain, not exactly. It was a sound of sheer, terminal shock. It echoed in the silent suite, then was swallowed by the mountain. A vault door, Griphook said, his voice unnervingly calm. One of the old ones. They used them as barricades. The wardens have blast powder. Thump, thump, asterisk. 2 more in quick succession. The painted crystal formations on the ceiling seemed to shiver. A faint puff of dust drifted down from a high corner. The mountain was being surgically cracked open. Harry found he had lost his appetite. He put the spoon down. The silence that followed the explosions was worse. It was a listening silence, waiting for the next fracture. It came not as a sound, but as a feeling. A wave of magic washed through the stone, so potent Harry could taste it on his tongue. Hot iron, ozone, and a cold, razor-sharp intent. It was the king's magic, unleashed. Not the controlled, calculating power of the throne room, but the raw, eruptive fury of a volcano. It was followed by a chorus of other magics, smaller but just as deadly, the song of rune-forged axes being swung, the shriek of binding spells snapping closed, the sizzle of curses meeting goblin-wrought shields. The battle was joined. Harry could see none of it, but he could feel it. The dead chit in his hand grew warm, then hot, as if resonating with the conflict. The bond he shared with Griphook, fresh from their shared ordeal, thrummed with tension. He could feel Griphook's focus, a taut wire, stretched down into the depths, listening to a song only he could hear. "They've found the main chamber," Griphook whispered, his eyes distant. "Dagmar is making a stand. He's using the old foundry of tears, good defensive position. Narrow approaches. But father has the high ground." Another, different tremor shook the suite. This one was accompanied by a deep, grinding roar, the sound of a whole section of tunnel collapsing. Griphook flinched. Dagmar's collapsing the tunnels behind him. Trying to trap the wardens in a cave-in. A grim smile touched his lips. Fool. He forgets. Who shaped these stones? The magic from below shifted. The king's furious signature swelled, becoming a directed, immense pressure. Harry felt it like a hand pressing on his chest from a mile away, a will of pure granite, commanding the very rock to obey. The grinding roar ceased. Then, impossibly, it reversed. The sound of stone grinding against stone became a smoother, sliding rumble, as if a giant child was pushing two halves of a split mountain back together. "He's holding the tunnels open," Harry breathed, awestruck. "He is reminding them who is king," Griphook corrected, pride sharp in his voice. The magical signatures from below clashed again, more violently. Harry could almost picture it, a storm of spells in a cavern lit by the hellish glow of magma and enchanted steel. He felt a sudden, sharp twang through the bond, a spike of alien pain that was not his own. Griphook hissed, his hand flying to his own shoulder. "You're hurt." Harry scrambled upright. "It is not me," Griphook gritted out, his face pale. "The bond, it echoes strong sensations. One of the wardens is down. A bad hit." He closed his eyes, concentrating. "But not fatal. The line holds." The battle raged in their senses for what felt like an eternity. Harry learned to read the symphony of violence, the percussive blasts of spell breakers, the staccato clash of melee, the deep, groaning bass notes of the king's earth magic reshaping the battlefield. It was terrifying. It was fascinating. It was the other side of the coin from the quiet lessons in the echoing cavern. This was what magic was for when diplomacy failed. This was the foundation upon which kingdoms like Gringotts were built, not just on gold, but on the willingness to defend it to the last breath, with utter, ruthless force. Then, everything went quiet. Not the listening silence from before. A true quiet. The magical signatures dimmed, receding like a tide. The tremors stopped. The distant, faint echoes of combat faded into nothing. Griphook let out a long, slow breath. "It's over." "Is he?" "Dagmar." Griphook's expression was bleak. "If he is lucky, he is dead. If he is not, he will wish he was. My father does not take prisoners from a fight like this." They waited in the profound stillness. The normal sounds of the mountain did not return. It was as if the entire bank was holding its breath, waiting for the king to emerge from the deep. It was nearly an hour later when the door to the suite opened. King Ragnarok stood in the doorway. He was covered in fine, gray dust that coated his black tunic and braided hair like ash. A long, shallow cut scored his left cheek, weeping a single track of dark, almost black blood. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. In his right hand, he held not a scepter, but a simple, heavy war axe of black steel, its blade notched and stained. He looked less like a king and more like an elemental force that had just finished arguing with the bedrock, and won. His burnt gold eyes swept the room, landing on Harry, assessing, then on Griphook. He gave a single, short nod. "It is done," he said, his voice hoarse, grating like stone on stone. "The Foundry of Tears is sealed. Dagmar and 37 of his loyalists are dead. The rest have surrendered their arms and their clan marks. They will be exiled to the surface, stripped of their names. They are goblins no longer." The sentence was delivered with a chilling finality. To be stripped of your name under the mountain was a fate worse than death. The king leaned his axe against the wall and walked to the bathing room. They heard the splash of water as he washed the dust and blood from his hands and face. He returned, looking marginally more like a monarch and less like a avenging spirit, though the cut on his cheek remained, a stark declaration of the night's work. He stood at the foot of Harry's bed, his gaze inscrutable. The poison was Dagmar's final gambit. A move of cowardice. He thought to shake my rule by killing a child under my protection. He thought it would make me look weak. A cold, mirthless smile. He was wrong. It has made you a part of the mountain's story. And it has reminded every goblin in these halls what happens when the king's wrath is awakened. He reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small object. He tossed it onto the bed beside Harry. It was a lump of rough, unprocessed silver ore, about the size of Harry's fist. But it was wrong. A thick vein of ugly, pulsating green-gray crystal ran through its heart, the same color as the dank bitterness of the poison. The crystal seemed to writhe faintly, though when Harry looked directly at it, it was still. "Fungal gloom crystal," the king said. "The source. Dagmar's token. I took it from around his neck before I separated his head from his shoulders." He pointed a thick finger at it. "That is what hatred looks like when it grows in the dark. It is poison given form. Remember it." Harry stared at the ugly stone, a chill that had nothing to do with sickness creeping over him. This was the heart of the thing that had almost killed him. He had no desire to touch it. "What should I do with it?" he asked, his voice small. "That," said the king, "is your first real lesson in our ways. In wizard magic, you would vanish it, or bury it, or hide it away. That is avoidance. Goblin magic is about transformation. About taking what is and making it into what should be. He leaned forward. That crystal is concentrated malice. But it is also power. Raw, toxic, dangerous power. The choice is not to hide from it. The choice is what to forge from it. Will you let it be a weapon that almost killed you? Or will you make it into a shield to ensure it never can again? He straightened. Think on it. When you are stronger. When your magic has settled from the burning. Then we will go to a forge, and you will learn to wield a hammer. You will learn to take the poison, and beat it into something useful. With that, he turned and picked up his axe. Griphook. With me. There are accounts to settle, messages to send to the other clans. The mountain must know the rebellion is ash. He looked back at Harry one last time. Rest, Potter. The war is over. For now. The two goblins left, the door sighing shut behind them. Harry was alone again. But the silence was different. It was the quiet after a storm. The suite felt safer, the walls more solid. The threat was gone, purged with fire and axe. His eyes drifted to the lump of silver ore with its venomous green heart, sitting innocently on his blanket. It was a promise, a challenge, a piece of the darkness that had tried to kill him, left in his care. He carefully, using the corner of the blanket, pushed it to the far side of the bedside table. He didn't want to touch it. Not yet, but he couldn't stop looking at it. It was the first thing he saw when he woke from another fitful doze hours later. The floating crystals had dimmed for the mountains, night, but the fungal crystal had a faint, sickly phosphorescence of its own. Will you let it be a weapon, or a shield? Asterisk. The question echoed in the quiet room. He thought of the green fire that had scoured the poison from his veins. His magic. Wild, but his. He thought of Griphook's steady song, giving it shape. He thought of the king's impossible strength, holding the mountain itself together. He was surrounded by power. Not the safe, wand-waving magic of storybooks, but a deeper, older, harder magic. A magic of will and stone and unforgiving consequence. He looked at his small hands in the gloom. They had held a silver coin, and a pulse of green light, and a spoonful of broth. What would they hold next? A hammer, an axe, a shield? He didn't know. But for the first time since arriving, a purpose began to stir, fragile but insistent, beneath the fear and the wonder. He wasn't just a burden. He wasn't just a debt. He was a variable, a piece on the board. And the king was teaching him how to move. He reached out, not to the crystal, but to the debt chit. He picked it up. It was cool now, inert. A symbol of a bond that had just been tested in fire and found unbreakable. He closed his fingers around it and looked back at the glowing green crystal. Weapon or shield? Asterisk. The mountain slept around him, its deep wounds freshly cauterized. But in the sunless suite, a 6-year-old boy lay awake, staring at a piece of poisonous stone, and beginning, for the very first time, to think like a smith. Chapter 6. The weight of a hammer. The axe cut on the king's cheek did not heal. It scabbed over with a dark, rough crust, a permanent scar to match the one on Harry's forehead. It was a message, carved into the monarch's own flesh: the mountain remembers its wounds. Life in the enclave adjusted to a new, sharper rhythm. The stewards moved with a silent, wary efficiency. The guards at the doors stood taller, their eyes missing nothing. Harry's recovery was swift, accelerated by the strange, lingering synergy of his and Griphook's magics. Within 2 days, the weakness was gone, replaced by a restless, buzzing energy. The poison was a bad memory, but the ugly crystal on his bedside table was a constant, silent tutor. He found himself studying it when he thought no one was looking, tracing the vile green vein with his eyes, wondering at its hardness, its latent, toxic power. On the third morning after the purge, Griphook did not take him to the echoing cavern. Today, he announced, his tone brooking no argument, you graduate from listening. Today, you learn to speak with your hands. He led Harry not to the Foundry Flats, but to a smaller, private forge complex attached to the royal enclave itself. It was a single, vaulted chamber, one wall open to a breathtaking, dizzying view of a bottomless geothermal chasm, from which a natural vent of shimmering superheated air rose, providing perfect, adjustable heat for the forge at its edge. The air here was dry and carried the clean, hot scent of stone and potential. Tools of gleaming steel and dark iron hung in meticulous order on the walls, hammers of various sizes, tongs, punches, files. In the center stood an anvil of flawless, dark gray steel, its surface smooth from centuries of use. Waiting for them was the massive, scarred goblin smith from the main flats. He wore a heavy leather apron, his powerful arms bare. The scar running from his hairline to his jaw seemed to gleam in the forge light. He didn't bow to Griphook. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Master Borin," Griphook said, with more respect than Harry had heard him use for anyone but his father. "This is Harry. He is to learn the first song." Borin's dark eyes, like chips of obsidian, moved to Harry. They held no curiosity, no animosity. They were the eyes of a craftsman assessing raw material. He looked Harry up and down, then grunted. "Small. Soft. Human bones are brittle. His will is not," Griphook replied evenly. Another grunt. Borin turned to the forge, where a bed of coals glowed with a fierce, white-hot heart. With a pair of long tongs, he drew out a small, rectangular ingot of dull, lead-colored metal. He placed it on the anvil with a definitive clunk. "Pig iron," Borin said, his voice a low rumble. "The simplest metal. Full of impurities. Weak. Unreliable. It is the foundation." He picked up a hammer, not the colossal one from the flats, but a smaller, balanced tool that still looked immensely heavy. He held it out to Harry, handle first. "Take it." Harry hesitated, then wrapped both hands around the leather-wrapped haft. The weight was astonishing. It pulled his arms down immediately. He strained, muscles trembling, to hold it level. Borin made no move to help. "The hammer is not a club. It is a voice. You do not smash. You persuade. The metal must be willing. You must convince it to change." He pointed at the ingot. "Your first task. Make it flat. One side. 10 strikes. Control the voice. Find the note." It sounded simple. It was impossible. Harry shuffled to the anvil, hefting the hammer with a grunt. He lifted it, aimed for the center of the ingot, and brought it down with all his might. Clang. Asterisk. The sound was a deafening, discordant shriek in the intimate forge. The hammer bounced wildly off the hard metal, the shock vibrating up Harry's arms into his shoulders, making his teeth clatter. The ingot skidded off the anvil and clattered to the stone floor. Silence. Borin looked at the ingot, then at Harry. He said nothing. Griphook, standing by the wall, winced slightly. Face burning, Harry set the hammer down, retrieved the ingot, and placed it back on the anvil. He took a deep breath, trying to remember what Borin had said. A voice. Persuade. Asterisk. He lifted the hammer again, more slowly. He tried not to use just his arms, but to put his slight weight behind it. He focused on the ingot, not as an enemy to be beaten, but as a stubborn, silent thing that needed to be asked. He brought the hammer down. Clang. Asterisk. It was slightly less awful. The ingot stayed put. But the blow was weak, glancing. It barely dented the surface. "You are whispering," Borin stated. "The metal is not listening. You must speak clearly. With intention. Not with fear, and not with anger. With purpose." Harry tried again. And again. His strikes were either wild and uncontrolled or timid and ineffective. His arms began to ache fiercely. Sweat beaded on his forehead, stinging his eyes. The heat from the forge was blistering. He felt clumsy, stupid, a child playing with a tool meant for giants. After the 9th pathetic strike, his frustration boiled over. This was like everything with the Dursleys, being given a task he could never hope to complete, just to highlight his inadequacy. Anger, hot and familiar, flared in his chest. He didn't want to persuade. He wanted to make it flat. He gripped the hammer, his small hands white-knuckled. He thought of the ingot as Uncle Vernon's smug face, as Dudley's sneer. He put all his helpless rage into the final swing. The hammer descended, and in that moment, the warm place behind his scar, which had been quiet since the purge, kicked. A tiny, unconscious spark of his magic, not the green fire, but the raw force of his will, leaked down his arms, into the hammer. Bong. Asterisk. The sound was different, deeper, resonant. Not a clang, but a clear, ringing note that hung in the hot air. The ingot didn't just flatten. Under the hammerhead, the metal flowed, spreading outwards in a smooth, perfect disc, as if made of soft clay. The hammer didn't bounce. It sank in slightly, then came away clean. Harry stared, panting. The perfect, one-strike flattening was more shocking than his earlier failures. Borin was suddenly there, his large, calloused hand closing around Harry's wrist, holding the hammer aloft. He peered at the hammerhead, then at the flawless disc of iron on the anvil. His obsidian eyes lifted to Harry's face. "What?" he said softly, the word more dangerous than a shout, "did you just do?" I don't know," Harry stammered. "I was just angry. Anger is a fire. It can heat the metal. But it cannot shape it. That," Boren pointed to the disc, "was not anger. That was command." He released Harry's wrist and picked up the iron disc. He turned it over in his hands. A single strike. A perfect spread. No cracks. No weak points. The grain of the metal is singing. He looked at Griphook, a silent question in his gaze. Griphook stepped forward. His magic is direct. It responds to strong emotion. But it is wild. It does not like subtlety. Wild is not the word, Boren murmured, still studying the disc. He tossed it back onto the anvil with a clink. Again, a new ingot. This time, do not be angry. Be specific. You wish to make it longer. Thinner. Like a thick wire. See it in your mind. Then make the hammer your voice to tell the metal what you see. He put another pig iron ingot on the anvil. Harry's arms were screaming. His magic felt jittery, unsettled by the sudden use. He wiped sweat from his eyes, gripped the hammer, and tried to push the pain and fatigue away. He looked at the squat ingot. He imagined it stretching, elongating, becoming a square-ended rod. He lifted the hammer, focusing on that image. He pushed the thought at the metal. Become this. Asterisk. He struck. Clang. Asterisk. A decent hit. The ingot dented, lengthened a little. But it was a normal strike. No magic. No flowing metal. Good, Boren said, to Harry's surprise. That is control. The other was a sneeze. This is a word. Now, find the middle. The magic is not a separate thing. It is your breath. It is the strength in your arm. Let it be part of the strike, not the driver of it. It was the most complex thing Harry had ever tried to do. To coordinate his aching muscles, his will, his magical core, and a specific, clear intent, all into the arc of a hammer swing. The next hour was a lesson in exquisite frustration. He produced a series of misshapen, lumpy metal blobs. But slowly, incrementally, he improved. The hammer began to feel less like a foreign object and more like an extension of his arm. His magical breath, as Boren called it, became a faint, steady hum in his blood, sometimes lending a little extra force to a strike, sometimes smoothing a rough edge as the tongs turned the hot metal. He was not forging anything. He was learning the alphabet of a language written in steel and force. Finally, when Harry's legs were shaking and black spots danced at the edge of his vision, Boren took the hammer from him. Enough. You will cramp. Then you are useless. Harry slumped against the cool stone wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, utterly spent. Every muscle felt liquefied. His hands were covered in new, angry blisters. Boren examined the last piece Harry had worked on, a vaguely tapered rod, uneven but recognizable. The human child has a strong song, he said to Griphook, as if Harry wasn't there. But it is a war song. It wants to break things, or make them perfect in one blow. It does not like the patient work. The 1,000 small strikes. This is a problem. Can it be taught? Griphook asked. Boren glanced at Harry, who was trying to drink from a water skin Griphook offered. Perhaps. If the metal is interesting enough. Pig iron bores him. It is too simple for his taste. The smith's eyes drifted to a locked cabinet on the far wall. We shall see. The next few days fell into a new pattern. Mornings were still for theory with Griphook, runes, history, the intricate laws of magical contracts. But afternoons belonged to Boren and the hammer. Harry's body adapted. The blisters calloused over. His arms grew tougher, stringy with new muscle. He learned to hold the hammer not just with his hands, but with his whole body, to let the weight do the work. He learned the notes, the different sounds a strike. Made on too cold metal, on perfectly heated metal, on metal ready to break. His magical control improved, but it was a stubborn, willful thing. It would flow easily when he was focused on a clear, physical goal, lengthen this, flatten that, but it balked at the subtle, repetitive work of smoothing and refining. Boren was a relentless, silent taskmaster. He offered no praise, only correction. A grunt for a decent strike. A pointed silence for a bad one. A week into his apprenticeship, Harry arrived at the forge to find a different material on the anvil. It was a piece of the silver ore from the deep dweller mines, but unlike the toxic lump in his room, this was pure, gleaming white silver in its rough state. Silver is alive, Boren said, not looking up from stoking the forge. It listens. It remembers. It is soft, but it holds enchantment like a cup holds water. Your task. Make a coin. A simple disc. But it must ring true when dropped. The ring tells the quality. Silver was different. It was malleable, but it fought back in subtle ways, wanting to tear, to warp under the hammer. Harry's first attempts were pathetic, crumpled wafers. His magic, which had been so forceful with iron, seemed clumsy with the silver, overwhelming it. Gentle, Boren growled for the 10th time. You are shouting at a whisper. Match its song. Harry took a breath, forcing his frustration down. He thought of the echoing cavern. Of listening. He held the small, hot piece of silver on the anvil with the tongs, and before he struck, he listened to it. He felt its soft, singing resonance, a high, bright note compared to iron's deep drone. He let his magic hum, not in his chest, but in his hand, trying to match the silver's frequency. Then he struck. Ting. Asterisk. A beautiful, clear, bell-like sound. The silver spread into a near-perfect, thin disc. It wasn't smooth yet, but it was whole. It sang. A flicker of something that might have been approval passed over Boren's scarred face. Better. Now, the face. You will stamp it. From a chest, Boren produced a small, steel stamp. On its end was engraved, not a goblin face or a number, but a simple, elegant lightning bolt. Harry's breath caught. It was the symbol from his dead chit. A mark of your making, Boren said. Heat the stamp. Press it into the coin. Steady pressure. Not a strike. An imprint. Hands trembling, Harry heated the stamp in the forge until its tip glowed cherry red. He aligned it over the silver disc, now cooled but still soft. He took another breath, poured his focus into his arm, and pressed down. There was a hiss of superheated metal on silver. He held it for a 5 count, then lifted. There, in the center of the little silver disc, was a perfect, raised lightning bolt. His mark. Boren took the coin, examined it, and dropped it on the anvil. Ting-ing-ing. The ring was pure, sustained, humming with a faint, magical resonance. It was a good coin. A true coin. You keep it, Boren said, tossing it to Harry. It was warm. A first word in the language of making. Do not lose it. Harry clutched the silver coin, the heat of it seeping into his blistered palm. It was worth nothing. It was worth everything. He had made this. With his own hands, his own will, his own magic. It wasn't a freakish accident. It was craft. That night, back in the sunless suite, he placed his handmade lightning coin next to the dead chit on the bedside table. He looked from one to the other. One was a chain, a promise owed. The other was a key, a promise he had made to himself. He then looked at the third object on the table, the lump of silver ore with the fungal gloom crystal. Weapon or shield? Asterisk. He was learning the hammer's song. He had spoken his first true word in silver. The toxic crystal seemed less like an abstract threat and more like a specific, difficult problem to be solved. A complex piece of metal to be understood, heated, and shaped. He wasn't ready. Not yet. His arms still ached. His control was fledgling. But for the first time, looking at the poisonous green heart in the stone, he didn't feel dread. He felt a craftsman's curiosity. What note would that sing when struck? Chapter 7. The Rune Scriber's Hall. The hammer's song was a language of force and fire. The silver coin was a word Harry had learned to speak. But the mountain had deeper, quieter tongues. Griphook introduced him to one of them the next morning. They did not go to the forge or the cavern. Instead, Griphook led him to a part of the bank Harry had never seen. A long, low-ceilinged hall tucked away behind the Hall of Records. The air here was cool and dry, smelling of ozone, ink, and something sharp and clean like lemon zest. The light came from hundreds of tiny, self-contained orbs that hovered over workstations, illuminating without casting shadows. This was the Rune Scriber's Hall. Dozens of goblins, young and old, sat at stone benches, their backs straight, their movements precise. They were not hammering metal. They were engraving it. With tools finer than needles, they inscribed minute, impossibly complex patterns onto strips of bronze, onto gold ingots, onto the hilts of blades and the faces of coins. The only sounds were the soft scratch-scratch of etching styluses, the occasional hiss of a cooling agent, and the low murmur of an instructor correcting a student's line. An elderly goblin with spectacles perched on the very end of his long nose glided over to them. He wore a plain gray robe, but his fingers were stained with a rainbow of metallic dusts. "Prince Griphook," he said, his voice a papery whisper. "And the guest. I am Master Krav. You wish to observe the art of binding. Harry needs to understand the theory before he can apply it," Griphook said respectfully. "He has felt the mountain's song. He has spoken a word in silver. Now he must learn the grammar." Master Krav's magnified eyes blinked slowly behind his lenses as he studied Harry. The human child who silenced the traitors, magic. An act of profound simplification. Rune work is the opposite. It is the art of asterisk complexification, of layering meaning, intent, and consequence into a permanent form. He gestured to a nearby empty workstation. "Sit. Watch. Do not touch. Your magic is a sledgehammer. In here, we use scalpels." Harry sat on the hard stone stool. On the bench before him was a thin rectangle of freshly polished copper, a set of fine etching tools, and a magnifying glass on a stand. At the next station, a young goblin apprentice, her tongue poking out in concentration, was carefully carving a series of angular symbols along the edge of a bronze disc. "That is the foundational sequence for unbreaking," Master Krav whispered, pointing with a long, delicate finger. "See the hook on the third rune. Too shallow. The intent will leak. It will be a shield that cracks under the first blow." He leaned over the apprentice. "Deeper. With conviction. You are not drawing. You are writing a law of reality onto the metal." The apprentice gulped, nodded, and adjusted her grip. She re-scored the line, her hand steady. The rune flared with a brief, copper-colored light as she finished it, then settled, seeming to sink into the metal itself. "Good," Krav said. "Now the link to the endurance cluster. Mind the angle of intersection. A right angle is conflict. A 45-degree angle is cooperation." Harry watched, mesmerized. This was magic stripped of wand waves and shouted words. It was silent, meticulous, and breathtakingly powerful in its permanence. A wizard's shield charm could fail if he lost concentration. A goblin-forged shield with proper runes would be strong until the metal itself corroded. "Runes are not spells," Krav explained, moving to Harry's side. "Spells are wishes shouted at the universe. Runes are contracts negotiated with it. You are offering the universe a pattern, a shape of power, and in return for the effort of inscribing it perfectly, the universe agrees to make that pattern true." He picked up a discarded copper strip with a botched rune. If the pattern is flawed, the contract is void. Or worse, it is misinterpreted. He bent the strip easily. Weakness. Or, he picked up another, this one with a rune that had a hairline fracture in one line. He tapped it. The strip suddenly glowed red-hot, then crumbled to black ash. Catastrophic feedback. Harry stared at the pile of ash. "So if I make a mistake, the magic turns in on itself? Or does something you did not intend? There is no, almost, in rune work. It is perfect, or it is nothing. It is the most unforgiving of the magical arts." Krav's eyes gleamed behind his spectacles. "It is also the foundation of our sovereignty. Our vaults are unbreakable not because of thick metal, but because of the runic lattices welded into every seam. Our blades cut through enchantments because their edges are inscribed with laws of severing and denial." For the next 2 hours, Harry was given a crash course in the basics. He learned the first 3 runes of the Avaz cluster: stability, connection, journey. He learned how their meaning changed based on orientation, on what other runes they touched, on the material they were inscribed upon. It was like learning maths, art, and a dead language all at once. His head throbbed with the complexity. "Enough theory," Krav finally said. "You have a physical mind. You learn by doing. But you will not touch precious metal. You will use slate." He placed a smooth, dark gray slate tile and a simple, pointed stylus of iron before Harry. "Copy this." He pointed to a single rune drawn on a piece of parchment. "Ansus, the rune for message, sign, or revealing." It looked simple. A shape like an angular F, with the crossbars pointing right. Harry picked up the stylus. It was cold and heavy. He positioned it over the slate, took a breath, and began to scratch the first vertical line. The stylus skidded, leaving a ragged, shallow gouge. "No," Krav said instantly. "You are scratching a surface. You must commit. The line must have a beginning, a confident path, and an end. It is a journey. Press down. Mean it." Harry tried again, pressing harder. The line was deeper, but it wobbled. Your will is divided. You are thinking of the line, and the pressure, and the shape. There is only the shape. Let your hand know the shape. Trust it. It was like the hammer, but infinitely more precise. Harry closed his eyes for a second, visualizing the rune. He saw it not as lines, but as a concept, a signal fire on a hill. A shout in a silent hall. A revealing asterisk. He opened his eyes, placed the stylus, and drew. The line was straight, deep, clear. He completed the rune in 3 more sure strokes. As he lifted the stylus from the final line, the carved rune on the slate glowed with a faint, steady white light for a moment before fading, leaving the grooves looking slightly sharper, more intentional. Master Krav was silent for a long moment. He peered at the slate through his magnifying glass. HMPH. The lines are crude, the intersections are blunt, but the intent is clear. The contract was accepted. He looked at Harry with wary interest. You visualized it as a whole, not as parts. That is unusual. Beginners get lost in the sequence. You saw the destination. He took the slate, produced a small vial of water, and let a single drop fall onto the rune. Instead of soaking in or spreading, the water droplet shivered, then split into 2 perfect, smaller droplets that rolled to the edges of the slate and off. The rune had conveyed its message of separation to the water. A crude success, Krav pronounced. But a success. Remember this feeling, the unity of intent. It is the core of the art. He gathered the tools. You may return tomorrow. We will try Berkanen. The rune of growth, of hidden potential. It is more subtle. It will test you. As they left the hall, the quiet scratch of 100 styluses following them like a whisper, Harry felt mentally drained but strangely exhilarated. It was a different kind of exhaustion from the forge. This was a puzzle his mind had wrestled with and, in a very small way, solved. Krav is the most respected rune scriber under the mountain, Griphook said as they walked back. If he says you have a feel for it, you do. Do not underestimate what that means. Many goblins train for years before they make a rune that the universe accepts on their first true try. It was just a line on a slate, Harry said, though a part of him glowed with the praise. It was a law you wrote onto stone, Griphook corrected. A small, temporary law, but a law nonetheless. My father will be interested. King Ragnarok was, indeed, interested. That evening, when Harry and Griphook were summoned to the study, the king examined the slate tile himself, running a thick finger over the grooves of the Ansu's rune. Clean intent, he grunted, setting it down. No hesitation. Good. He fixed Harry with his burnt gold stare. The runes are the skeleton of our power. The forges are the muscle. You are being given the keys to the kingdom's secrets, Potter. Not out of generosity. Out of necessity. He leaned forward, the scar on his cheek a stark shadow in the firelight. The life debt is one thread. Your survival is another. But there is a third, thicker cord now binding you to this mountain. You have been attacked within these walls. Your blood and magic have been spilled in defense of it, and in defense of my heir. By our oldest customs, that gives you rights. And responsibilities. He picked up a scroll from his desk and unrolled it. It was a genealogical chart, but not of goblins. The names, written in sharp, angular script, made Harry's heart stutter. Fleemont Potter. Euphemia Potter. James Potter. Lily Potter née Evans. Lines connected them, and a final, bold line led to a box at the bottom, Harry James Potter. Your family, the king said. Clients of Gringotts for 10 generations. Your vault, Vault 687, is one of the oldest, richest, and most heavily warded in the bank. It contains more than gold. It contains heirlooms, journals, possibly, secrets. Harry stared at the names. James, Lily. They were just words. Ghosts. But seeing them written here, in this mountain, made them feel more real than any photograph he'd never had. As your magical guardian, Albus Dumbledore has control of the trust that releases funds for your upbringing, a pittance sent to your non-magical relatives, the king continued, a note of disgust in his voice. But he does not control access to the vault itself. Only a blood heir, or one granted explicit power of attorney by a blood heir, can open it. He let that hang in the air. Harry understood. He was the blood heir. He was here. I could open it. He asked, his voice small. You could request it be opened, the king corrected. It is your right. But, Potter, hear me. A vault is not just a room. It is a statement. The moment you step into your family vault, the wards will register your presence. Gringotts, central ledgers will note it. The magic will ripple. Dumbledore will almost certainly be alerted. The wizarding world will, eventually, learn that Harry Potter is no longer tucked away in Surrey. They will wonder where he is. And with whom. It was a crossroads. A deliberate, strategic move. Why are you telling me this? Harry asked. Because the debt requires I ensure your well-being, the king said. Ignorance is not well-being. You have a legacy. A weaponless, landless, but significant legacy. You should know what is yours. And because, he tapped the Potter name on the scroll. I am curious. The Potters were a strange line. Alchemists. Innovators. They had a fondness for our work, unlike many wizards. They paid promptly. They respected contracts. What did they leave for the son who lived? It may be useful. It may be dangerous. The choice to look is yours. But if you choose to look, you do it with our guidance. You do not go in blind. Harry looked at the names of his parents. He had nothing of them. No pictures. No stories that weren't lies from the Dursleys. Here, under a mountain, a king was offering him a key to a door behind which pieces of them might wait. He thought of the cold, empty cupboard. He thought of the green light in the graveyard. He thought of the hammer's song and the rune's light. He wasn't just Harry the Freak anymore. He was Harry Potter, and he had a vault. I want to see it, he said, the decision solid in his gut. The king nodded, as if he'd expected nothing else. Tomorrow, after your session with Krov, Griphook will accompany you. It will be educational. A sharp, calculating gleam entered his eyes. And Potter, while you are in the vaults, you will see the heart of our power. You will see what wizards entrust to us, and why they fear us. Remember it. The next day, the rune Berkanen proved as tricky as Krov had warned. It was a rune of soft curves and hidden meanings, about contained growth, like a seed in the earth. Harry's first 3 attempts on slate were failures, the lines were too harsh, the intent too forceful. The slate tiles simply cracked. You are trying to force growth, Krov chided. You cannot command a seed. You can only provide the conditions. The rune is the soil. The magic is the rain. Your intent is the sun. They must work together. On the 4th attempt, Harry thought of the little silver coin he had made. He thought of the rough ore transforming under heat and hammer. He didn't visualize the rune as a shape, but as a process. A safe, dark space where something could become more. He inscribed the curves, gentler this time. The rune glowed with a soft, brown-green light. When he brushed his finger over it, the slate felt strangely warm, fertile. Adequate, Krov said, but he was hiding a smile. You learn quickly. Too quickly, perhaps. Do not become arrogant. The next rune will humble you. After the lesson, Harry's mind was abuzz with lines and meanings, but a different kind of anticipation was building. Griphook met him outside the hall, his expression unusually solemn. Ready? The prince asked. Harry nodded. He wasn't sure he was ready. But he was going. They did not take a cart. They walked down a wide, gently sloping ramp that corkscrewed deep into the earth. The air grew cooler, the light more diffuse, coming from glowing fungi and crystals set into the walls. The sounds of the bank faded, replaced by a deep, profound silence and the distant, echoing drip, drip, of water. They passed vault doors of increasing size and complexity, bronze, iron, silver, gold. Some were plain. Others were covered in breathtaking bas-relief sculptures or terrifying guardian statues that turned their heads to track the boys as they passed. Harry felt the weight of centuries, of accumulated wealth and secrets, pressing down on him. Finally, Griphook stopped before a vault door that looked, surprisingly modest. It was made of a dark, non-reflective metal, smooth and seamless. No carvings. No statues. Just a single, round keyhole of pure silver in the center. Above it, in simple, engraved numbers, *687*. The Potter Vault, Griphook said. Key. Harry had no key. He'd never seen a key. Place your palm on the door, Griphook instructed. Next to the keyhole. The ward is blood-locked. Hesitantly, Harry stepped forward. He placed his right hand flat against the cool, dark metal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a line of brilliant, white light traced the outline of his hand. A series of soft, metallic clicks and clunks echoed from within the door's immense thickness. The silver keyhole glowed. With a sound like a sigh of long-held breath, the seamless door developed a hairline crack down its center. It split, the two halves sliding smoothly and silently into the walls, revealing not a dark hole, but a soft, golden light. Griphook gestured. "After you." Harry stepped over the threshold. The vault was not large. Perhaps the size of the Dursleys' living room. But every inch of it glittered. Mounds of gold coins, galleons, formed gentle hills. Stacks of silver sickles and bronze nuts filled bins. Jewelry, goblets, and other precious items were neatly arranged on shelves. But Harry's eyes skipped over the wealth. They went to the back of the vault, where a simple wooden desk and chair sat, looking utterly out of place amidst the treasure. On the desk was a small, open chest. He walked towards it, his footsteps loud in the quiet. Griphook stayed by the door, a silent guardian. The chest was lined with faded blue velvet. Inside, resting on the fabric, were a few simple items. A pair of round, wire-rimmed glasses, identical to the ones Harry would need but didn't yet have. His father's. A long, finely carved wooden wand of polished holly, resting as if waiting to be picked up. His mother's. His father's. He didn't know. A sealed letter on heavy parchment, addressed in a flowing, feminine hand, "For our son, Harry." Asterisk. And a single, small, framed moving photograph. In it, a young man with wildly messy black hair and glasses identical to the ones in the chest was laughing, waving at the camera. He had his arm around a woman with vibrant red hair and brilliant green eyes, Harry's eyes. She was smiling, then she turned her head to kiss the man's cheek. They looked happy. They looked alive. Harry reached out, his fingers trembling, and picked up the photograph. He stared into his mother's laughing face. He saw his own eyes looking back at him, full of love and light. A pain, sharp and sweet, lanced through his chest. It wasn't the dull ache of missing something he'd never had. It was the acute agony of seeing exactly what had been taken from him. He didn't cry. He just stood there, holding the picture, his breath coming in short, quiet hitches. After a long moment, he carefully set the photo down and picked up the letter. He broke the plain wax seal, no crest, just a smear of red, and unfolded it. "My dearest Harry, if you are reading this, then the worst has come to pass, and we are gone. I am so sorry, my darling boy. Sorry to leave you. Sorry for the world you must face without us. Asterisk. Know this, above all else, we loved you. We love you still, with every bit of our hearts, which are now a part of you. Asterisk. Your father is insisting I not be, maudlin, so I will be practical. The vault is yours. The gold is a tool, use it wisely. The wand was mine, holly and phoenix feather. It may choose you, or it may not. The glasses were your father's first pair, a reminder that even the clearest sight sometimes needs help. Asterisk. There is more, hidden in the deeper compartments of this vault. Ask the goblins, they know how to find what is meant to be found. Things we gathered, things we made, things we feared. Knowledge is your true inheritance, Harry. Not gold. Learn everything you can. Asterisk. Be brave. Be kind. Remember that love is not a weakness, it is the only magic Voldemort could never understand. It is your shield, and it is your sword. Asterisk. All our love, forever. Mum and Dad. Asterisk P.S. Your father says to tell you, give him hell, Prongslet. Asterisk. Harry read the letter twice, 3 times. He traced the words Mum and Dad with his finger. The paper was slightly smudged, as if touched by tears before the ink was fully dry. He looked up at Griphook, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. There's more, Harry said, his voice thick. Hidden compartments. Do you know? Griphook nodded slowly. The Potters were known for it. Compartments within compartments. Vaults within vaults. It is a specialty of our Ward Smiths. I can have them surveyed. But it will take time, and it will create more ripples. Harry looked back at the photograph, at his parents' smiling, moving faces. He looked at the letter, at the promise of more of them, more of their world, their secrets. He had come for a piece of his past. He had found a compass for his future. He carefully folded the letter, placed it back in the chest with the glasses and the wand. He picked up the photograph once more, holding it close. I'm ready to go, he said softly. As they left, the great dark door sighing shut behind them, sealing the light and the love and the ghosts back inside. Harry felt different. The void where his family should have been was no longer empty. It was filled with a photograph, a letter, and a fierce, burning determination. He had seen what was his. And he had a message from his parents. Give him hell. Asterisk. He looked at Griphook, then back at the number 687. He wasn't just a guest in the mountain anymore. He was a client, an heir, a potter. And as they walked back up the spiral ramp, the silent, watching vaults lining their way, Harry knew one thing for certain: he would be back. Chapter 8. The Ghost in the Gears. The photograph lived under Harry's pillow. The letter was folded inside his new tunic, against his heart. They were secrets, warm and private, that he carried with him into the loud, public lessons of the mountain. The gold in the vault meant nothing to him. The wand was a curiosity he was almost afraid to touch. But the words, learn everything you can. Love is your shield. Asterisk. He carried them into Master Krov's hall, where the rune Berkanen finally yielded to his understanding, glowing with a soft, persistent light that made a dry piece of slate feel damp to the touch. He carried them to the forge, where Borin, with a grunt of something like approval, moved him from pig iron to mild steel, and the hammer began to feel like a true extension of his will. He also carried a new wariness. The king's words echoed, "The moment you step into your family vault, the magic will ripple." He expected something to happen. A stern, bearded wizard in starry robes to appear in a flash of fire. A howler letter to shoot down from the surface. But days passed, and the mountain's routine held. The silence felt more like a held breath than peace. It was Griphook who noticed the first irregularity. They were in the royal study, the king reviewing a ledger of war yields from a new seam. A junior clerk, a young goblin with nervous hands, presented a report. "My king, the quarterly audit of the high security time locks in the investment wing shows a discrepancy." The king didn't look up. "What kind of discrepancy?" "A fractional lag, sire. In the harmonic resonance of the primary gear cluster for vaults 712 through 718. The master clock says 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 3 seconds have passed since the last full alignment. The subsidiary gears in that wing register 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 4 seconds. The king's quill stopped. He lifted his head slowly. "A 1-second drift. In a Gringotts time lock." "Yes, sire. It has self-corrected already. The runic buffer's engaged. But the anomaly is logged." "Which vaults?" 712, Lestrange. 713, Malfoy. 714, Black. 715, Knot. 716, Selwyn. 717, Roll. 718, Mulciber. A cold silence filled the study. Harry, pretending to read a tome on metallurgic alloys, felt the temperature drop. He knew none of those names, but the way the king's face hardened told him everything. "Death Eater vaults," the king said, his voice dangerously soft. "The inner circle. All sealed or under heavy monitoring since the war." He stood, pacing to the geological globe. A 1-second drift. Not enough to break a lock. Just enough to, hiccup. To create a phantom echo in the ward matrix. He turned his burning gaze on the clerk. "When?" "The log places the event 3 days ago, sire. At approximately 2 hours after noon." The king's eyes flicked to Harry for a fraction of a second. 2 hours after noon. The approximate time Harry had been in the Potter vault. "Coincidence?" Griphook asked, his voice tight. "There are no coincidences in a mountain of runes and gears," the king snapped. He slammed a fist on the table, making the ledger jump. "A targeted, infinitesimal disruption. In a cluster of vaults belonging to the worst of the Dark Lord's followers. Triggered by the opening of the Potter vault." He stared into the middle distance, thinking with a speed that was almost visible. A resonance. A sympathetic magical echo. Something in the Potter wards talked to something in their wards. Or, someone used the ripple from your entry as a cover. He whirled on the clerk. "Full diagnostic on every ward and lock in that wing for the past week. I want to know if a flea sneezed near those doors. And bring me the logs for any human visitors to those vaults in the last month. Now." The clerk scurried out. The king looked at Harry. "Your family had enemies, Potter. Powerful, wealthy, cruel enemies. They may be in prison or pretending to be upstanding citizens, but their gold is still here. And gold can be made to listen. To be a conduit. You think someone tried to break into those vaults when I opened mine?" Harry asked, a chill crawling up his spine. I think someone very clever used a perfectly legitimate, expected magical event, the heir accessing his vault, to mask a very small, very illegal one. Like a pickpocket brushing against you in a crowd. He leaned on the table, his shadow engulfing Harry. This is the game, Potter. This is the world you are in. Your every move is watched, not by eyes, but by magic. Your very existence is a key that can unlock more than your own door. The diagnostics revealed nothing else. No forced entry. No tampering. Just that single, inexplicable, 1-second drift in a galaxy of perfect, interlocking time. The visitor logs showed only approved Gringotts curse breakers and the vault owner's legal representatives, all clean, on the surface. But the king was not satisfied. The ghost is in the gears, he told Harry and Griphook that evening. We cannot see it, but we know it stepped on the floor. We must now learn its gate. He devised a new lesson. Not of making, but of unmaking. Of sensing fault lines. He took them to a disused section of the vaults, a hall of decommissioned locks and broken wards used for training. In the center of the room was a massive, defunct vault door, its runes dark and dead. This door once held the treasury of a fallen clan, the king said. Its wards are spent, its magic inert. Or so it seems. He placed a hand on the cold metal. All magic leaves a scar. A memory in the stone, in the metal. The stronger the magic, the deeper the echo. I want you to listen to this door, Potter. Not to the loud song of active magic, but to the whisper of what was. Find the ghost in the metal. It was the hardest thing Harry had been asked to do yet. In the echoing cavern, the mountain's song was alive, present. This was archaeology. Listening for a vanished shout in a silent room. He placed his hands on the door, closed his eyes, and reached for his magical sense. He felt the cold, dead iron. The emptiness where great power had once thrummed. It was like touching a corpse. He strained, pushing his awareness deeper. Behind his scar, a faint ache began, not pain, but a focusing, a tuning. He thought of the 1-second drift. A hiccup. A tiny flaw in perfection. Find the flaw, asterisk he told himself. Listen for the crack that isn't there. Asterisk. He breathed in time with the mountain's deep, slow hum, letting his own magic vibrate at the same frequency, trying to become a sounding board. Minutes passed. He felt nothing but cold and void. And then, a snag. Not a sound. A feeling, like a thread on a sweater catching on a nail. A tiny, almost imperceptible roughness in the absolute smoothness of the dead magic. It was in the lower left quadrant of the door, near a complex knot of defunct runes that had once governed loyalty tests. He didn't open his eyes. He pushed his focus towards the snag. There, he whispered. Something, sticky. The king was beside him in an instant. Where? Harry guided the king's hand to the spot. The king placed his palm over it, his own power, vast and deep, probing gently. His eyes narrowed. Yes, a residue. Not of the original ward. Something else. Something, oily. A foreign charm. A tagging charm, I'd wager. Meant to alert someone when this vault was opened. He removed his hand, looking at Harry with renewed intensity. You found a 5-year-old magical stain on dead metal. A stain I missed. It was just a snag, Harry said, unsure. It was a ghost, the king corrected. And you heard its whisper. He turned to Griphook. This is the skill we need. Not brute force. Sensitivity. If someone is using the Potter Vault's activity as a trigger or a cloak, we need to know what they're touching. We need a hound who can smell the magic they leave behind. The plan that formed was risky, a delicate operation of bait and observation. The king would order a scheduled, routine inspection of the Death Eater Vault cluster, a legitimate event. Griphook and Harry would be part of the inspection team, hidden under Notice Me Not charms and perception filtering runes inscribed by Master Krov himself. Their job wouldn't be to inspect the vaults. Their job would be to inspect the space around them. To listen, to feel, for any magical residue, any snag that shouldn't be there, any sign that the ghost in the gears had been prowling. 2 days later, Harry found himself standing in the hushed, high-security wing, disguised in the robes of a junior apprentice curse breaker, a heavy hood obscuring his face. Griphook stood beside him, looking like any other goblin technician. A team of senior Gringotts ward smiths, led by account manager Ragnick, moved with solemn precision, running glowing diagnostics wands over the immense, ominous doors of vaults 712 through 718. The air here was thick with dormant, malicious magic. Harry could feel it pressing on his skin like a physical weight, a cold, arrogant, cruel energy seeping from behind the metal. These vaults didn't just hold gold, they held dark artifacts, forbidden knowledge, the condensed hatred of pure blood fanaticism. Now, Griphook murmured under his breath. Listen, don't look at the doors. Look at the air, the stone, the gaps. Harry closed his eyes, leaning on the technique from the dead vault. He breathed, tuning himself to the mountain's hum, then subtly detuning, making himself a void, a listening shell. At first, it was chaos. The active diagnostics of the ward smiths created a buzzing overlay. The deep, sleeping malice of the vaults was a constant, low drone. He filtered it out. He sought the silence between the notes. He moved slowly, pretending to examine the base of a marble pillar near Vault 714, the Black Vault. His fingers brushed the cool stone. Snag. Asterisk. Not on the stone. In the air, a foot above the floor, right in front of the vault's keyhole, was a faint, clinging trace of magic. It was different from the vault's own aura. It was newer, cunning. It felt like a spider's web, designed to vibrate when touched. A magical tripwire. He didn't point. He caught Griphook's eye and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod towards the spot. Griphook's gaze sharpened. He made a show of adjusting a dial on a harmless-looking device he carried, subtly pointing its sensor array at the location. A minute later, he glanced at a readout only he could see and gave a fractional shake of his head. The tripwire was invisible to standard detection. It was keyed to something specific. They moved to Vault 713, Malfoy. Here, Harry felt nothing near the door. But when he listened to the runic inscriptions framing the vault number, he felt another anomaly. One rune, a secondary, alert, sigil, had a hairline fracture of magic running through it. Not enough to break it. Just enough to redirect its message. To send its all clear signal somewhere else, while maybe whispering a copy of the real status to a third party. It was brilliant. Insidious. This wasn't breaking and entering. This was subversion, turning the vault's own defenses into a surveillance system for the enemy. By the time the inspection ended, Harry had pinpointed 3 subtle, foreign magical traces across 2 vaults. The ghost had been busy. And it was very, very good. Back in the study, the mood was grim. Ragnik, having been briefed, was pale with a mixture of fury and professional humiliation. The tampering is masterful. Years of work, inserted millimeter by millimeter during legitimate visits by lawyers and stewards. They have been turning our own security into their intelligence network. For what purpose? Griphook asked. They cannot remove anything without triggering the full alarms. Not removal, the king said, his voice like grinding stone. Preparation. They are mapping the defenses. Learning the rhythms. Waiting for a moment when the wards might be legitimately lowered or distracted. He looked at Harry. A moment like the heir of an old enemy family suddenly appearing on the radar, causing a sympathetic ripple in ancient, linked ward magics. He stood, a decision solidifying in his eyes. We do not remove their tampering. Not yet. That would alert them. We turn their weapon back on them. We feed the spiderweb false vibrations. We make the redirected runes send lies. A savage smile touched his lips. We will build a ghost of our own inside their ghost. And we will watch what it attracts. He assigned teams of his most trusted rune smiths, under Master Krov's direct supervision, to begin the counter-operation. It would take weeks, months. A silent war of infinitesimal adjustments fought in the spaces between seconds. For Harry, the lesson was profound. Power wasn't just green fire and hammer blows. It was silence. It was patience. It was the ability to hear a single wrong note in a symphony of perfection. That night, as he lay in the sunless suite, he took out his parents' photograph. His father was grinning, forever caught in a laugh. His mother's green eyes sparkled. Your every move is watched. Asterisk. Learn everything you can. Asterisk. He looked from their faces to the ugly lump of fungal gloom crystal on his bedside table. Weapon or shield, subversion or strength, the mountain was teaching him all of it. He had come here by accident, a scared child fleeing a cage. He was becoming something else. A student of stone and silver. A listener to ghosts. A piece on a board he was only beginning to understand. And somewhere, in a manor house far from the mountain, a wizard with pale blonde hair and a cold smile examined a small, enchanted mirror that had just flickered, reporting a 1-second drift in a time lock that had since been corrected. He saw no cause for alarm. Just a minor glitch. He set the mirror aside, unaware that the ghost he had placed in the gears had just been found, and was now being carefully, silently, rewired to whisper secrets back to the mountain it was meant to betray. The game was on, and Harry Potter, age 6, was learning the rules. Chapter 9, A Visitor in White. The rhythm of the deep wards settled into a tense, watchful hum. The mountain's counter-ghost was being woven, thread by invisible thread, into the enemy's web. Life for Harry returned to its disciplined cadence, the forge's heat, the rune hall's quiet, the study's strategizing. The photograph under his pillow was a constant warmth, the letter a whispered creed. Then, the mountain's peace shattered from an entirely unexpected direction. It began with a tremor different from the deep warden's work. Not an explosion, but a deep, resonant boom that echoed up from the very foundations, as if a giant had struck the bedrock far below. Every crystal in the sunless suite chimed in discordant sympathy. Harry, practicing the *Berkanen* rune on a slate, felt the vibration in his teeth. A moment later, the gong that signaled a top-tier security breach sounded, a deep, ominous note that rolled through every corridor, shaking dust from the ceilings. Harry had never heard it before, but its meaning was instinctive: danger. Intruder. He scrambled to the door of the suite, but it was sealed shut, a pale blue ward light flaring around its edges. Lockdown. Griphook burst from his own chambers a second later, his face a mask of alarm. "What is it?" Harry asked, his heart hammering. "A breach at the deepest ingress point," Griphook said, his ears twitching as he listened to sounds Harry couldn't hear. "The sub-level 0 elevator. Someone just arrived. Bypassed every ward on the descent. The external alarms never sounded. Dagmar's people. No. Their power was subtle, like poison. This is a hammer. A very precise, very powerful hammer." They waited, trapped in the enclave's tense silence. Minutes stretched like taffy. Then, the lock on Harry's door clicked, and the ward light died. A guard stood there, his armor scored and smoking slightly. "Prince Griphook, the king commands your presence. And, the guests. In the Grand Concourse." Now, the Grand Concourse was a tableau of controlled chaos. Dozens of guards were stationed at every archway and balcony, crossbows and enchanted spears trained on a single point at the concourse's heart. The usual bustle of wizards and witches was gone, swept aside. A cordon of stone-faced goblin wardsmiths had erected a shimmering, dome-shaped barrier of blue energy, sealing off the center of the vast hall. And inside that barrier, standing calmly beside the shattered, smoking remains of the ornate elevator gates, was a man. He was tall and elderly, but stood with a straight back. Ease that spoke of hidden strength. His hair and long beard were a silvery white, sweeping and majestic. He wore robes of deep plum, now dusted with fine gray stone powder from his explosive entry. His half-moon spectacles perched on a long, crooked nose, but behind them, his eyes were a piercing, electric blue, twinkling with an intelligence that missed nothing. In one hand, he held a long, knotted wand of unfamiliar wood. In the other, he held a small, glowing silver device that hummed softly. He looked utterly, completely unperturbed by the ring of weaponry pointed at him. King Ragnarok stood before the energy barrier, his axe in his hand, his scarred cheek pulled tight in a furious snarl. "Albus Dumbledore," he growled, the name resonating in the hall with the weight of history and profound displeasure. "You violate our sovereignty. You bypass our wards. You shatter our doors. Explain yourself before I have you shot full of holes and your corpse fed to the stone slugs." Albus Dumbledore. The name hit Harry like a physical blow. The wizard who had left him on the Dursleys' doorstep. His magical guardian. The greatest wizard of the age, according to Griphook's reluctant lessons. Dumbledore's eyes swept over the king, the guards, the barrier. They lingered for a fraction of a second on Harry, standing beside Griphook at the edge of the cordon. There was no shock in that blue gaze. Only a deep, weary understanding, and a flicker of something that might have been sorrow. "My most sincere apologies, King Ragnarok," Dumbledore said, his voice calm, mellifluous, and carrying effortlessly in the silent hall. "The methods were, I grant you, distressingly direct. But time, I fear, is a commodity in short supply, and the usual channels are compromised. I come on a matter of utmost urgency, concerning the security of a child in your care." The child is under my protection, the king snarled. A fact you seem intent on testing. Indeed, Dumbledore said, his eyes still on Harry. And I must confess, your protection has proven far more robust than any I could have envisioned. The blood wards at Privet Drive fell silent 3 weeks ago. Not breached. Not decayed. Simply, silent. As if the subject had vanished from the world entirely. A feat I had believed impossible. So that was it. The ripple had been detected. Not by the Death Eater's ghosts, but by the very man who had placed him in his cage. You tracked me here? Harry asked, the words coming out before he could stop them. His voice sounded very small in the vast space. All eyes turned to him. Dumbledore's gaze softened further. Not directly, Harry. The blood wards were tied to your aunt's home, not to you. Their silence told me you were gone. Tracking a specific magical signature through the world's noise is like finding a particular grain of sand on a beach. Unless, of course, that grain of sand is placed directly into the one location on Earth most saturated with unique, powerful, and meticulously catalogued magical signatures. He gestured slightly with his wand hand, indicating the mountain around them. Gringotts, the heart of magical commerce. When a Potter vault, dormant for a decade, registers an access by a blood heir, the event has a certain luminosity. To those who know how to look, he had used the vault opening as a beacon. He hadn't needed to track Harry, he'd tracked the door Harry opened. Clever, the king admitted, though it clearly pained him. But it does not explain the demolition of my elevator. A necessary urgency, Dumbledore said, and for the first time, Harry saw a shadow pass over the old wizard's serene face. The moment the Potter vault pinged on certain restricted monitoring charts at the Ministry, charts accessible to those with divided loyalties, a race began. I merely ensured I won it. I have reason to believe others are now aware that Harry is no longer under the protection of his aunt's house. And that he is connected to Gringotts. They will be drawing their own conclusions, and making their own plans. The king's grip tightened on his axe. You bring a threat to my doorstep, wizard. I bring a warning, Dumbledore corrected gently. And an offer. The situation has changed. Harry's safety can no longer be assured by simple hiding. He has stepped onto the board. The question is who gets to move him next. He is not a pawn to be moved. Griphook's voice rang out, sharp and furious. He stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Harry. He is a life debtor to the royal line. His safety is our honor. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. He looked from Griphook to the king, his keen eyes missing nothing, the protective stance, the debt chit that had unconsciously slipped from Harry's tunic into his hand. A life debt, he murmured. That explains a great deal. And complicates a great deal more. He sighed, a sound of genuine weariness. King Ragnarok, might we speak in a less fortified environment? I have no wish to be your enemy. Indeed, I believe we may have a common interest. The king stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then he gave a sharp, slashing gesture. The dome barrier vanished. The guards did not lower their weapons. My study. You will be escorted. And you will be disarmed. Dumbledore smiled faintly. Of course. He placed his wand carefully on the floor and kicked it gently towards the nearest guard. He then deactivated the silver device in his other hand and handed it over as well. A simple locator. Keyed to familial magics. Quite harmless. The king turned on his heel. Griphook. Potter. With me. The walk to the study was conducted in a silence so thick it was suffocating. Harry's mind was reeling. This was the man who had abandoned him to the Dursleys. The man who was, by wizarding law, responsible for him. He looked powerful, kind even. But Harry had learned to see the layers beneath stone. He trusted the king's furious caution more than Dumbledore's twinkling eyes. In the study, with two hulking deep wardens flanking the door, the king took his seat behind his desk. Dumbledore took the offered chair without fuss. Harry and Griphook stood to the side, witnesses. Speak, the king commanded. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. Voldemort is gone, but his ideology is not. His followers are wounded, but not dead. Many occupy positions of influence. They have wealth. They have patience. And they have a burning desire for revenge upon the child who symbolizes their master's downfall. He looked at Harry. They believed you hidden away, neutered by non-magical relatives, out of reach and out of mind. Your appearance here, at Gringotts, changes that calculus dramatically. It suggests you are not being raised in ignorance. It suggests you are being cultivated. That is a threat they cannot ignore. So they will come for him here. The king asked, his tone daring them to try a direct assault on Gringotts. Dumbledore gave a small, humorless chuckle. Even in their madness, they are not that foolish. No, they will use politics, influence. They will pressure the ministry to investigate why a child, a ward of the chief warlock no less, is residing in a foreign power's stronghold. They will call it kidnapping, a breach of the international statute of secrecy. They will demand his return to the wizarding world, specifically, into the custody of someone sympathetic to their views. Harry's blood ran cold. The Dursleys had been a cage of neglect. This sounded like a cage with a purpose. You cannot stop this. The king asked. I can delay. I can argue. But the political winds are shifting. The ministry is fearful, eager to placate the old families who still have golden power. A formal demand, backed by a sympathetic faction, it could succeed. Especially if they can paint your protection as self-serving, an attempt to control the Potter fortune. It is self-serving, the king said bluntly. The debt binds us. His survival is our interest. That does not make it a lie. I do not dispute that, Dumbledore said. But perception is its own battlefield. Which brings me to my offer. He leaned forward. Do not make me your enemy in this, King Ragnarok. I do not wish to remove Harry from your care. The life debt is a powerful, legitimate bond. But I must be able to tell the ministry, to tell the world, that I am satisfied with his welfare and education here. That requires access, oversight. The king's eyes turned to chips of flint. You wish to install a spy in my mountain. I wish to fulfill my legal and moral duty as his magical guardian, Dumbledore corrected, his voice firm for the first time. I propose a compromise, a liaison, a witch or wizard of my absolute confidence, who can visit periodically, assess Harry's progress, and report back that he is healthy, safe, and receiving an education suitable for a magical child. This person would operate under your rules, with escorts, within designated areas. Their presence legitimizes his stay here in the eyes of the wizarding law. It pulls the teeth from any kidnapping narrative. The silence stretched. Harry could see the calculations flying behind the king's eyes. He saw the danger Dumbledore outlined. He also saw the profound invasion of sovereignty the offer represented. Who is this paragon of trust? The king asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Dumbledore's expression softened into something truly gentle. An old friend. A warrior who has earned more respect from your people than perhaps any other witch alive. She understands secrecy. She understands loyalty. And she has a fondness for children that transcends political lines. He paused. I speak of Minerva McGonagall. The name meant nothing to Harry, but he saw Griphook's eyes widen slightly. Even the king's stony expression flickered with something akin to reluctant respect. McGonagall, the king mused. The Transfiguration Mistress. She dueled 3 of our ward smiths to a standstill during the 68 negotiations over Wandwood tariffs. Fought clean. Honored the terms afterwards. He drummed his fingers on the desk. A single liaison. McGonagall. Visits no more than once per month. She is escorted at all times by guards of my choosing. Her access is limited to the guest suites and a designated meeting room. She speaks only to the boy and to me. She files her reports with you, and you alone. Any breach of these terms, and the agreement is void, and I will consider your breach of my mountain an act of war. Dumbledore inclined his head. Agreed. On one further condition. The king waited, silent. Harry himself must have a say, Dumbledore said, turning those piercing blue eyes on him. He has had too few choices in his young life. He must choose to accept this arrangement. To meet with Professor McGonagall. To allow this bridge to be built. All eyes turned to Harry. He felt 6 years old again, small and on display. He looked at Dumbledore, the man who had placed him with the Dursleys. He looked at the king, who had given him a hammer and a rune stylus. He looked at Griphook, whose life was literally in his hands. He thought of the Death Eater vaults, of the ghosts in the gears, of the political storm brewing on the surface. Hiding wasn't enough anymore. He was on the board. The king was teaching him to be a piece with a will of his own. If she comes, Harry said, his voice quiet but clear, I get to ask her questions. About my parents. About everything. And if I don't like her, she doesn't come back. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, but there was a new depth of respect in them. A most reasonable condition, Harry. Professor McGonagall will answer what she can. I give you my word. Harry looked at the king. The monarch gave a single, slow nod. It was Harry's choice. His first real political decision. Okay, Harry said. She can come. Then it is settled, Dumbledore said, rising. I will make the arrangements. The first visit in 1 week's time. And now, I shall take my leave, and repair your elevator doors on my way out. Again, my apologies for the dramatics. He collected his wand and device from a guard, gave a small, polite bow to the king, a warmer nod to Harry and Griphook, and was escorted out. The study was quiet after he left. The king let out a long, slow breath, the tension draining from his shoulders, replaced by a weary vigilance. A formidable player, he muttered. He turns an invasion into a negotiation, a threat into an alliance of convenience. He is right, of course. This gives us a shield against the ministry. But it also gives him a window into our halls. He looked at Harry. You handled yourself well. You thought like a prince, not a pawn. Remember this feeling. This is what power feels like when it is tempered by choice. Harry nodded, his mind buzzing. He had just helped broker a deal between a goblin king and the most powerful wizard in Britain. He had met the man who shaped his destiny, and found him to be both kind and terrifyingly clever. As he lay in bed that night, the photograph of his parents in his hand, he thought of Dumbledore's words. He has stepped onto the board. Asterisk. Next week, a new piece would arrive, Professor McGonagall. A bridge to the world he was born into, a world that wanted to claim him, control him, or kill him. He looked at the silver lightning coin he had made, and the poisonous green crystal beside it. He was learning to shape metal and understand runes. Now, he would have to learn to navigate people. To ask the right questions. To see the ghosts not just in gears, but in smiles and offers of help. The mountain had been his sanctuary, his forge, his school. Now, it was about to become his embassy. And he, Harry Potter, was its youngest, most unexpected diplomat. Chapter 10, The Transfiguration Mistress. The week passed in a heightened state of preparation. The mountain, still simmering from Dumbledore's uninvited arrival, shifted its focus from internal threats to external scrutiny. The guest wing, a seldom used sector near the upper concourse, was aired out and polished to a sterile shine. A meeting room was selected, a neutral, windowless chamber of pale marble with a single, heavy oak table and 2 chairs. It was a room designed for transactions, not comfort. Harry's lessons took a new turn. Griphook, with the king's blessing, began to tutor him in wizarding culture and history from the goblin perspective. It was a crash course in what to say, and more importantly, what not to say. Do not mention the echoing cavern, or your work with the hammer, Griphook instructed, his voice low and serious as they sat in the suite's library. To them, that is, unnatural. A child learning goblin craft. They will see it as contamination. Or a political statement. What about the runes? Harry asked, tracing the *Berkanen asterisk symbol absently on the table with his finger. Basic rune theory is taught at Hogwarts, but not like Croft teaches it. If she asks, say you have been learning letters and numbers. It is not a lie. Griphook's black eyes were intense. Your safety here depends on them believing you are being given a safe, neutral, conventional upbringing. If they suspect you are being turned into a goblin weapon, or even just an ally with deep ties, the pressure to remove you will become unstoppable. The word, weapon, hung in the air. Harry thought of the green fire, the hammer, the poisonous crystal. Was that what he was becoming? What do I tell her about the Dursleys? He asked, a harder edge in his voice. Griphook was silent for a moment. The truth, he said finally. But a measured truth. Do not shout it. Do not weep. State it as fact. You were starved, locked up, hated for your magic. Dumbledore left you there. Let her sit with that. It will make his compromise taste of ash in her mouth, and remind her why you might choose a mountain over a cupboard. On the morning of the visit, Harry was dressed not in his comfortable tunic, but in new, finely made wizarding robes of dark gray, a gift, or a costume, from the king's tailors. They felt stiff and foreign. The det chit was on a thin silver chain under his robes, hidden. His handmade lightning coin was in his pocket, a secret touchstone. He was escorted not by Griphook, but by 2 silent deep wardens, through the bank's main concourse during its busiest hour. It was a show. See, the human child walks freely among us. He is not a prisoner. Wizards and witches stopped their haggling to stare, whispers following him like a wake. The meeting room felt colder than the rest of the mountain. King Ragnarok was already there, standing like a statue behind one of the chairs, his arms crossed. He wore his crown of iron and diamonds, and his ceremonial axe was leaned against the wall within easy reach. He gave Harry a single, brief nod. They waited. Precisely at the appointed hour, the door opened. Account manager Ragnick entered first, his face a mask of professional disdain. Behind him came a witch. Minerva McGonagall was tall and thin, with black hair streaked with gray pulled into a severe bun. She wore robes of emerald green, and a tall, pointed hat sat squarely on her head. Her face was sharp, lined with intelligence and a seemingly permanent expression of strict disapproval. But behind her square spectacles, her eyes were a quick, bright hazel, and they took in the room, the king, and finally Harry, in one sweeping, appraising glance. She did not curtsy or bow. She gave a crisp, respectful nod to the king. Your Majesty, thank you for receiving me. Professor, the king acknowledged, his voice a neutral rumble. This is Harry Potter. You have 1 hour. McGonagall's gaze settled on Harry. For a second, the stern lines around her mouth softened, and her eyes held a profound, complicated sadness. Mr. Potter, she said, her voice clearer and softer than he'd expected. It is a great relief to see you well. Harry said nothing. He just looked at her, taking her in. She didn't look like a spy. She looked like a very strict teacher. But he remembered Griphook's warning, perception is a battlefield. Ragnick and the king withdrew, leaving them alone in the silent room. McGonagall gestured to the 2 chairs. Shall we sit? They sat, facing each other across the wide table. The distance felt immense. Professor Dumbledore has informed me of the circumstances of your departure from your relatives' home, McGonagall began, choosing her words with obvious care. And of the bond that now ties you to Gringotts. I am here, first and foremost, to ascertain your welfare. Are you being treated well, Harry? It was a simple question. A trapdoor question. He could hear the unspoken layers. Are they feeding you? Are they hurting you? Are they turning you against your own kind? They saved my life, Harry said, his voice flat. Twice. Once. From traitors who tried to kill Prince Griphook. Once from poison those traitors put in my bath. McGonagall's lips pressed into a thin line. A flicker of something, anger, horror, passed behind her spectacles. I see. And since then, I have a room. It has books. I have lessons. What kind of lessons? Numbers, letters, history. Not a lie. Just not the whole truth. Magic, she asked, leaning forward slightly. I'm learning control, Harry said, which was the most honest thing he could say. My magic, it can be loud. They're helping me make it quieter. McGonagall studied him, her gaze piercing. He met it steadily, his green eyes unwavering. He saw her taking in his posture, his clean but simple clothes, the calm certainty that had replaced the skittish fear she might have expected from a mistreated child. He was not the broken cowboy she might have imagined. You have your mother's eyes, she said suddenly, the words escaping as if pulled from her by force. The professional mask slipped, revealing a raw, grieving woman beneath. Exactly her eyes. And your father's fortitude. This was the opening, the bridge. You knew them, Harry said, not a question. I did. Her voice thickened. I taught them both. They were remarkable people. Brave, clever, reckless at times. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. Your father was one of the most talented Transfiguration students I ever had. Your mother, her protective charms were sublime. A kind heart, but a spine of steel. Harry's throat tightened. These were not stories from a book. This was a living person who had seen them, known them. What were they like? Not as students. Just them. McGonagall was silent for a long moment, as if deciding how much of the past to unearth. James was loud, she said finally. A born leader, though it took him years to learn to lead for the right reasons. He had a laugh that could fill a room. He was fiercely, unquestioningly loyal to his friends. And he loved your mother from the moment he saw her on the Hogwarts Express, though it took him 7 years and a war to convince her to give him the time of day. A laugh that could fill a room. Harry tried to imagine it, matching it to the laughing man in the photograph. Lily was quieter, but her presence was just as strong. She had a fierceness about what was right. She stood up to bullies, even when the bully was your father and his friends in their younger, more foolish days. She was brilliant, with a particular gift for potions and charm work. And she had a temper, McGonagall added, a genuine, fond glint in her eye. When she was angry, the air around her would crackle. James was the only one who could make her laugh when she was in one of her rages. Harry absorbed every word, building a mosaic of ghosts. They were becoming people. Flawed, vibrant, real people. Why did they die? The question was out before he could stop it, blunt and brutal. McGonagall flinched. The sorrow returned, deeper now. Because they were good, and they fought against a great evil. Because they trusted the wrong person. Because sometimes, the world is cruel, and the best of us pay the price. She took a steadying breath. They died protecting you, Harry. Never, ever doubt that. Their love for you was the last, strongest magic they ever wrought. It is the reason you are alive. Love is your shield. His mother's letter echoed in his mind. He nodded, the lump in his throat making it hard to speak. He had answers now. Painful, precious answers. Professor Dumbledore says people will try to take me away from here, he said, changing the subject back to the present. People who followed, the evil. He is correct, McGonagall said, her stern demeanor returning, a shield against the pain. There are those who wish to see you either under their control, or removed as a symbol entirely. Your presence here is a complication they did not anticipate. This arrangement is meant to placate the more reasonable voices at the Ministry, and to provide a legitimate reason for you to remain under King Ragnarok's protection. Do you think it will work? I will make it work, she said, and there was an iron conviction in her tone that reminded him of the king. What was done to you at your aunt's house? She shook her head sharply, as if banishing a vile thought. It was a grievous error. One I argued against, for what little good it did. You will not be returned to a place of neglect, Harry. Not while I draw breath. If this mountain is your sanctuary, then I will be the gatekeeper who ensures the world respects its walls. It was a vow. A warrior's vow. Harry believed her. The hour passed swiftly after that. She asked him more about his routine, food, sleep, exercise. He answered truthfully within the carefully constructed boundaries Griphook had set. She asked if he had any questions about magic, about the wizarding world. He asked about Hogwarts, about houses, about Quidditch, a sport that sounded wonderfully, terrifyingly chaotic. She answered with a teacher's precision, but he saw the spark of enthusiasm in her eyes when she described the moving staircases or the house rivalries. When Ragnik re-entered to signal the end of the hour, Harry felt a surprising pang of disappointment. McGonagall stood. Thank you for speaking with me, Harry. I shall return in 1 month's time, if that is acceptable to you. Harry looked at her, the stern professor with his mother's memory in her eyes and a vow of protection on her lips. She was a bridge. But she was also a piece of his past, a keeper of stories he desperately needed. It's acceptable, he said. She gave him another long, appraising look, then a curt, approving nod. She turned to the king, who had re-entered silently. He is well, your majesty. He is safe. And he is learning. You have my report. The king's expression was unreadable. Then our agreement stands. With a final glance at Harry, Professor McGonagall turned and left, her green robe sweeping behind her, the door closing on the world she represented. In the silence that followed, the king let out a slow breath. She is formidable. Honorable. For a wizard. He looked at Harry. Well, she knew them, Harry said softly, the words full of wonder and ache. She really knew them. The king's gaze softened, just a fraction. Then the bridge has value beyond politics. Good. Remember what she said, but remember also why she is here. She is a shield, but she is also a window. We must be mindful of what we show through it. Harry nodded. He understood. The meeting had been a success. He had gained a connection to his parents, and a powerful ally. He had also performed his role perfectly, the well-cared for, mildly educated ward, not the boy learning the hammer's song and the rune's law. As he walked back to the sunless suite with his guard, he felt the 2 silver objects against his skin, the debt chit and his lightning coin. One was a chain of honor. The other was a secret promise to himself. He had met the Transfiguration Mistress. He had looked into the window of the wizarding world and seen both kindness and danger. And he had learned a new lesson, that the truth, like metal, could be hammered into different shapes. Some shapes were for showing. Others were for keeping close, in the dark, where they grew strong and sharp. He was Harry Potter. He lived in a mountain. He had a Goblin Prince for a shadow, a king for a teacher, and now, a stern Scottish witch for a guardian. And he was, slowly, painstakingly, learning to be the smith of his own fate. Chapter 11. The Soul of the Stone. The mountain exhaled after McGonagall's departure. The formal scrutiny was over, for a month at least. But the pressure didn't vanish, it transmuted. Harry's education intensified, becoming less about protection and more about potential. The king, it seemed, had been waiting for the first inspection to pass. Now, the real work could begin. Master Krov introduced him to *Sowilo, the sun rune, a symbol of wholeness, of invincible will, of the guiding force that cannot be deflected. It was the most aggressive rune Harry had yet encountered, all sharp angles and forward thrust. Inscribing it on slate without the slate shattering required a delicate balance of absolute confidence and perfect control. He failed 7 times, each failure a sharp crack that made him flinch. On the 8th, thinking not of the sun but of the unyielding, constant core of the mountain itself, he succeeded. The rune glowed with a fierce, golden light that didn't fade, burning its afterimage into his eyes for minutes. In the forge, Borin moved him from shaping simple forms to his first joint. 2 pieces of steel, heated to a glowing orange, had to be hammer-welded into one. It wasn't enough to smash them together. The magic, the intent, had to flow through the hammer and into the seam, convincing the separate grains of metal that they had always been a single being. The first attempts produced weak, brittle joints that snapped under Borin's testing tongs. The failures were loud, definitive. But with each one, Harry learned. He learned to feel the exact moment of perfect heat, to hear the singing readiness of the metal, to pour his focus into the weld point not as a collision, but as a marriage. It was after a particularly grueling session at the anvil, his arms trembling and his mind numb with concentration, that Griphook found him. The prince's expression was unusually solemn. "My father wishes to see you. In the deep gallery. Not the study. Not the throne room." The deep gallery was a place Harry had only heard of, a natural cavern system below even the lowest vaults, said to be where the mountain's first heartstone was found. It was not a workshop or a hall of state. It was a sacred place. They descended for what felt like an age, taking narrow, rough-hewn stairs that spiraled down through living rock. The air grew colder, thicker, tasting of ancient water and a deep, resonant silence that had weight. The glowing fungi gave way to a soft, sourceless phosphorescence from the stone itself. Finally, they emerged into a cavern that stole Harry's breath. It was not large, but it was perfect. The walls were a mosaic of crystalline formations in 1,000 colors, all growing towards the center of the space. And in the center, resting on a natural plinth of pure white quartz, was the heart stone. It was not what Harry expected. It was not a glittering gem. It was a lump of rough, dark rock, about the size of a human head, shot through with veins of silver, copper, and a deep, blood-red crystal. It looked unremarkable, but the magic radiating from it was staggering. It was the concentrated essence of the mountain's song, the deep hum Harry felt everywhere, made manifest. It vibrated in his teeth, in his bones, in the core of his magic. It felt patient, immeasurably old, and aware. King Ragnarok stood before it, not as a king, but as a supplicant. He wore no crown. His hands were empty. He was simply standing, his eyes closed, as if listening. "You have learned to listen to echoes," the king said without turning. His voice was a low murmur, meant not to disturb the stone's silence. "You have learned to speak to metal with a hammer. You have begun to write laws on slate. Now, you must learn the most difficult lesson. You must learn to listen to the soul of the thing you wish to change. Not its song, not its memory, its purpose." He turned then, his burnt gold eyes reflecting the stone's inner light. "All things have a purpose, Potter. A stone's purpose is to be. A sword's purpose is to cut. A vault's purpose is to hold. Magic is the art of aligning with that purpose, or, of persuading it to adopt a new one." He gestured to the heart stone. "This stone's purpose is to anchor. It is the root of the mountain's stability. It cannot be moved. It cannot be shaped. To try would be to destroy the mountain. One works with such a thing, not upon it." He walked to a small alcove where a workbench had been set up. On it lay the lump of silver ore with the fungal gloom crystal. Next to it was a small, perfect hammer of black iron, a set of fine engraving tools, and a crucible. This, the king said, pointing to the poisonous ore, also has a purpose. Its purpose is to rot, to poison, to spread its own corruption. That is its nature. Your task is not to deny its nature, but to redirect its purpose. To take its inherent power, the power to effect change, to dominate its environment, and convince it to serve a different end. He picked up the ore, hefting its weight. We will not destroy the gloom. We will transmute it. We will take its corrosive power and turn it into a power of dissolution. But of a specific kind. Not of life, but of other magics. Of lies. Of hidden enchantments. A sharp, fierce light entered his eyes. We will make a tool to find ghosts. Harry's heart began to pound. This was it. The promise from weeks ago. The process has 3 parts, the king instructed, his voice taking on the cadence of a master craftsman. First, the silver must be purified and separated from the crystal. They are bound, but their purposes are at war. The silver wants to shine, to conduct, to be pure. The gloom wants to fester. You must listen to both, and with the hammer, you must mediate. You must convince the silver to let go, and the gloom to concentrate. He placed the ore on a small anvil set before the heart stone. You will work here, in the presence of the anchor. Its stability will ground the process, prevent the gloom's corruption from spreading. Begin. Harry approached the anvil. The proximity to the heart stone was overwhelming. His magic felt both amplified and soothed, like a roaring river being channeled into a deep, steady channel. He picked up the small black hammer. It was perfectly balanced, cool in his hand. He looked at the ugly ore. He closed his eyes, pushing past the instinctive revulsion. He listened. He heard the silver first, a high, bright, singing note, pure and desperate, like a bird trapped in mud. Then, beneath it, he felt the gloom. A slow, pulsing, dissonant drone. A melody of decay. It was not evil. It was simply, itself. Relentless, hungry, transformative in its own destructive way. His task was not to judge. It was to understand, and then to persuade. He opened his eyes, heated the ore in the crucible until the silver glowed and the green crystal within pulsed with a sickly light. With tongs, he placed it on the anvil. He did not strike immediately. He held the hammer above it, letting his magic flow down his arm, not as a command, but as a question. An offer. Silver. Be free. Asterisk. He brought the hammer down, not on the crystal, but on the edge of the silver. Ting. Asterisk. A clear, clean note. A flake of pure, bright silver sheared away from the main mass, falling to the stone like a teardrop. The gloom crystal throbbed, angry at the loss. He worked with a slow, rhythmic patience he hadn't known he possessed. Each strike was a negotiation. He praised the silver's purity, encouraging it to separate. He acknowledged the gloom's strength, asking it to gather itself, to become more itself, to leave the silver behind. It was a dialogue conducted in heat, force, and will. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. The heat from the ore was immense. The psychic pressure of holding 2 conflicting magical natures in his mind was worse. But the heart stone's anchoring presence held him steady, a bedrock in the storm. Slowly, painstakingly, the silver was liberated. A small pile of gleaming, purified granules grew beside the anvil. And left in the center was a concentrated, walnut-sized core of the fungal gloom crystal, now a deep, almost black-green, throbbing with condensed, toxic power. It was no longer diluted by silver. It was pure purpose, to corrupt. Good, the king murmured, a note of genuine approval in his voice. Part 1 is complete. Now, the crucible. Harry placed the purified gloom crystal into the small crucible. The king handed him a vial of powdered moonstone and a sliver of what looked like solidified moonlight. These are reagents of revelation and truth. Their purpose is to show what is hidden. You must convince the gloom to adopt this purpose. To use its power to rot away not flesh, but falsehood. To dissolve glamours, to eat through lies. It was an alchemical marriage of opposites. Corruption wed to clarity. Harry combined the reagents with the crystal in the crucible. He placed it over a small, blue-flamed brazier. He didn't stir. He focused his will into the flame, into the mixture. He imagined the gloom's hungry power, now directed. Not at life, but at illusion. Not at health, but at secrecy. He visualized it as a solvent that could eat through the oil of a tagging charm, that could dissolve the false signal of a redirected rune. He poured his intent into the crucible, a steady, unwavering stream of magic shaped by the certainty of the rune *Sowilo, invincible purpose. The contents of the crucible began to swirl, then melt. The green-black crystal dissolved into the moonstone and moonlight, not vanishing, but transforming. The color shifted from sickly green to a clear, viscous liquid with a faint, emerald shimmer. It looked like liquid diamond. Now, the vessel, the king said, placing before him the final piece, a small, circular lens of flawless rock crystal, set in a plain band of the purified silver Harry had just liberated. Harry, using a tiny pipette made of dragon bone, carefully dripped the transformed gloom liquid onto the center of the rock crystal lens. As each drop landed, it spread, not wetting the surface, but sinking into it, becoming one with the stone. The lens remained clear, but when Harry looked through it, the world gained a faint, shimmering, green-tinted halo around the edges of things. The final step, the king said, his voice a whisper. The binding rune, not on slate, on the silver band. The rune must be *per throw, the rune of mystery, of the hidden thing becoming known. But you must inscribe it not with a stylus, but with the heat of your magic, through the lens itself. You must focus your will through the tool, to bind its purpose forever. Harry's hands were trembling with exhaustion. This was beyond anything he had attempted. He picked up the lens, now set in its silver band. He held it up, looking at the silver through the crystal. He called up the shape of *per throw* in his mind, a complex, angular rune that looked like an empty cup waiting to be filled. He didn't have a tool. He had his magic, and the lens that was now part liquid gloom, part revelation. He focused on a spot on the inside of the silver band. He poured his intent through the lens, imagining the rune burning itself onto the metal knot. With fire, but with meaning. A thin, precise beam of emerald light, shot through with threads of silver and gold, lanced from the center of the lens, striking the silver band. Where it touched, the metal did not melt. It changed. The rune *per throw* appeared, not carved, but as if it had always been part of the metal's grain, glowing with a soft, internal light for a moment before settling, permanent and perfect. Harry lowered the lens, gasping. He was drained, utterly spent. His vision swam. The king took the finished object from his trembling hand. He held it up, examining it through the lens, then looking at the rune on the band. He gave a slow, deep nod. "You have done it," he said, and there was something like awe in his rumble. "You have taken poison and made it into a key. You have listened to the soul of a thing, and persuaded it to sing a new song." He handed it back to Harry. "This is yours. A seeker's lens. Look through it at magic, and it will show you the truth of it. The gloom within it will hunger for falsehood and dissolve subtle enchantments, revealing what lies beneath. It is a tool for finding ghosts." Harry slipped the band onto his finger. It was cool. The lens sat over his palm. He looked at the king through it. The monarch's powerful aura appeared as a solid, deep gold flame, unshakable and true. He looked at the heart stone. It was a pillar of intertwined, harmonious light, impossibly complex and stable. He looked at his own other hand. His magic shimmered around it, a vibrant, chaotic green shot through with threads of silver and a core of black, the legacy of the poison, now mastered. He had made this. From the ore that tried to kill him, he had made a tool for seeing. "Remember this day, Potter," the king said, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "This is what you are. Not a wizard who takes. A maker who transforms. You have taken the attack of your enemy and forged it into your first true weapon. A weapon of sight. Now, you will never be blind to their tricks again." Exhaustion crashed over Harry, but it was a clean exhaustion, the fatigue of creation, not destruction. He was led back to the sunless suite, the seeker's lens a cool, unfamiliar weight on his finger. He collapsed into bed, but before he slept, he held up his hand, looking at the green crystal of the lens in the dim light. It no longer looked poisonous. It looked deep, knowing. He had faced the soul of the stone, and the poison within himself, and he had not flinched. He had spoken, and it had answered. He was no longer just a student. He was an apprentice who had completed his first masterpiece. And somewhere in the deep, silent galleries, the ghost in the gears, unaware, continued its patient work. It did not know that a new eye had just opened in the mountain. An eye that could see in the dark, and hungered for the taste of lies. Chapter 12. The Map and the Mark. The seeker's lens was a secret. Its weight on Harry's finger was a constant, cool reminder of the alchemy in the deep gallery, the transformation of fear into focus. He didn't wear it openly. It stayed under his glove during lessons, a hidden eye. He practiced with it in the privacy of the sunless suite, gazing at ordinary objects. His goblet shimmered with the faint, benign magic of preservation runes. The painted ceiling revealed itself as more than pigment, it was a tapestry of layered, dormant luminescence charms, a night sky that could, with a command, blaze with subterranean constellations. The world was no longer just solid. It was translucent, layered with intention. This new perception bled into his other studies. In the rune scriber's hall, Master Krov set him to inscribing logas, the water rune, of flow, intuition, and the unconscious. Harry found he could now see the flow of his own magical intent as he carved, a silver-blue current that either harmonized with the rune's shape or snagged against it, causing the slate to crack. His success rate improved dramatically. Krov, never one for effusive praise, simply stopped handing him new slates after the third perfect inscription in a row, his magnified eyes studying Harry with deep, thoughtful curiosity. At the forge, Boren grunted when Harry, peering through the lens at a piece of steel heating in the coals, announced, "It's ready. The magic in the center has caught up to the magic at the edges." Boren tested it with a seasoned eye and a probing spell, then gave a single, slow nod. The human child was learning to see the song, not just hear it. But the true test of the lens, Harry knew, would be against the real ghost, the subtle tampering in the high-security vault wing. He wasn't allowed back there, of course. The King's counter-ghost operation was a delicate, adult affair. But the principle of it consumed him. If he could see magical intent in a goblet or a piece of steel, could he see the pattern of an intrusion? Not just feel a snag, but perceive its shape. He needed a map, not of geography, but of magic. He began in the Sunless Suite's library, poring over the dense, scholarly tomes left by the long-ago diplomat. He found schematics of early ward theory, diagrams of magical ley-line convergence, and a crumbling, handwritten journal titled, "On the Resonance Signatures of Enchanted Materials." The journal was in a spidery, old-fashioned hand, full of complex equations and wild, theoretical leaps. But one passage, underlined in faint brown ink, seized his attention. Thus, if the permanent magical signature of a place or object can be understood as a unique harmonic chord, any foreign enchantment introduces a dissonant note. The stronger the foreign enchantments will to remain hidden, the more subtle the dissonance, often manifesting not as a wrong note, but as a slight pressure on the surrounding harmonies, a bending of the local magical field. A bending of the field. That's what he'd felt as a snag. The lens let him see the light of magic. Could he learn to see the bends in that light? He needed to practice on something smaller, safer. He remembered the dead vault door in the training hall, the one with the old tagging charm residue. He asked Griphook if he could return there. To what end? Griphook asked, sharpening a small dagger at his own desk in the anteroom. To learn to see what I felt, Harry said, holding up his gloved hand. To understand the bends. Griphook's black eyes flicked to Harry's hand, knowing what lay under the leather. After a moment, he sheathed the dagger. The king said you were to understand the ghosts. Very well. But we do not go alone. And you tell no one of your tool. They went with a single, silent deep warden as escort. The training hall was as Harry remembered, cold, silent, dominated by the great, dead door. Show me, Griphook said. Harry pulled off his glove. The seeker's lens caught the dim light. He took a deep breath, calming his mind, and lifted his hand, peering through the crystal at the door. Through the lens, the door was a flat, dark gray void. Its own magic was spent, leaving only the faintest ghostly afterimage, like the shadow of a flame on a wall. But where his fingers had found the snag before, he now saw it. It was a distortion, like looking through a pane of glass with a single, almost imperceptible bubble in it. The dead magical field of the door warped around the spot, flowing past it with a slight ripple. And within the bubble itself was a faint, oily, greenish smear, the residue of the tagging charm. It was weak, faded, but unmistakable, a scar on the nothingness. There, Harry whispered, pointing without touching. It's like a bubble in water. The magic flows around it. Griphook stared at the spot, then at the lens. You see it. Truly see it. It's a bend, a pressure. Harry moved the lens, scanning the rest of the door. He found two more, much fainter distortions, Old, decaying diagnostic spells cast by Gringotts ward smiths years ago, their purpose spent but their impression lingering. They had a different texture, sharper, more official, less sly than the tagging charm. He was seeing the history of the door written in bent light. A fierce excitement burned in his chest. He needed to record this. To make a map of these pressures. Back in the suite, he emptied a pot of ink and meticulously cleaned it. He then went to the bathing pool, filled the pot with clear water, and brought it to his desk. He needed a surface that could hold an impression, that could flow. He dipped his finger into the water, thinking of the Laga's rune, of flow and intuition. He closed his eyes, remembering the exact shape of the distortion from the tagging charm. He focused on the feeling of it, the sly, persistent pressure. He opened his eyes and gently touched the surface of the water. Where his finger met the water, the surface didn't ripple outwards in circles. It depressed in a specific, complex pattern, a shallow, bowl-like distortion with minute, swirling eddies at its edges, perfectly mimicking the magical bend he had seen. He held the image in his mind, pouring a trickle of his magic into the water to fix the impression. He removed his finger. The distortion in the water remained stable, a perfect, three-dimensional map of a magical anomaly. He had done it. He had translated a sight from the lens into a tangible record. Over the next few days, he became obsessed. He got permission to visit other disused, low-security vault doors and artifacts in the training halls. With Griphook as his ever-present shadow, he scanned them with the lens, memorizing the pressure signatures of different kinds of magic, the blunt, forceful imprint of a broken blasting curse, the delicate, woven lattice of a decayed custody ward, the jagged, chaotic scar of a magical backfire. Each one, he mapped onto the surface of water in his inkpot, holding the image with his will. He learned to adjust the depth of the impression, a deeper depression for a stronger residual magic, finer eddies for more complex spells. He was building a lexicon of magical footprints. One afternoon, while scanning a practice lock that had been subjected to 100 different Alohomora variants, he saw something new. Among the chaotic overlay of impressions, there was a tiny, perfect, star-shaped distortion. It was incredibly subtle, but it had a chillingly familiar feel, cold, arrogant, and meticulously crafted. It reminded him of the malice he'd felt seeping from the Death Eater vault doors, but refined, minimized to an almost surgical pinpoint. Griphook, he said, his voice tense. Look at this. Through the lens. Griphook took the lens. Harry had reluctantly shown it to him, swearing him to secrecy, and peered at the lock. The prince's breath hissed between his teeth. A monitoring charm. A high-grade one. Not Gringotts' issue. This is the ghost's work. Or one like it. He lowered the lens, his face grim. They've been practicing here, on our training equipment, testing their methods where we would not think to look. The discovery sent a shock through their small circle. The king, upon hearing, ordered a secret, lens-assisted sweep of all training and diagnostic areas. They found 3 more of the star-shaped distortions, tiny, nearly invisible listening posts planted in the mountain's own classrooms. The ghost wasn't just in the high-security wings. It was in the walls, learning, adapting. This changed the game. The counter-ghost operation in the vault wing was now only one front. The enemy had a broader intelligence network than they'd imagined. The king made a decision. Harry's maps, his growing lexicon, were too valuable to keep as a child's experiment. He summoned Master Krav and a senior ward smith named Hilda, a severe goblin with fingers stained permanently blue from arcane reagents. In the study, Harry demonstrated, making a water map of a simple Lumos charm residue from a stone. Krav peered at the floating, stable distortion in the water, his magnified eyes wide. A sympathetic resonance recording, using water as a medium for Lagas-based impressionism. Child, this is unorthodox. Brilliantly unorthodox. Can it be scaled? The king asked, cutting to the point. Can we map the distortions in the high-security wing? Create a live diagram of the ghost's network. Hilda the ward smith bent over the inkpot, poking the solidified impression with a crystal rod. The medium is too ephemeral. Water evaporates. The will holding it will fade. But the principle, her blue-stained fingers twitched with excitement. We could use a suspension of ground moonstone and memory water in a sealed crystal basin. Link it to a series of scanning crystals placed at nodal points in the wing. The distortions in the magical field would create corresponding impressions in the suspension, a living map of magical pressure. A living map. A chart of lies and hidden things. The project was given the highest priority. Harry, to his astonishment, was made a consultant. His unique perception, guided by the lens, was needed to calibrate the scanning crystals, to teach them what a hostile distortion felt like compared to a benign Gringotts ward. For the next week, Harry's life became a blur of intricate, high-stakes work. He stood with Hilda and her team in the now cleared high-security wing, the air humming with silent tension. He would focus the Seeker's lens on a section of wall, on the air before a vault door, and point out the distortions, the star-shaped monitors, the spiderweb tripwires, the subtly redirected runes. There, he'd whisper, and a wardsmith would place a small, clear crystal on the spot. The crystal would pulse, absorbing the pressure signature. Back in a newly configured chamber near the rune hall, a massive, shallow basin of crystal, 3 feet across, was filled with a milky, opalescent suspension. As each scanning crystal was linked to the basin via hair-thin strands of enchanted silver, an impression would form on the suspension's surface, a tiny, 3-dimensional model of the distortion it monitored. Slowly, a ghostly cityscape of malignant magic began to take shape in the basin. It was a network. The star monitors were outposts. The tripwires were perimeter alarms. The redirected runes were hacked communication lines. They all fed towards 2 main clusters of intense, complex distortion, Vault 713 Malfoy and Vault 714 Black. These were the hubs, the hearts of the ghost. Looking at the living map, Harry understood the enemy's plan for the first time. It wasn't about breaking in. It was about creating a backdoor so perfectly integrated that the vaults wouldn't even know they'd been opened. The ghost was building a shadow key, woven from the vault's own magical DNA. And the king's counter-ghost, the lies they were feeding into the network, appeared on the map as gentle, soothing indentations of blue light, carefully overriding the red-tinged distortions of the enemy. It was a war of topography, fought in a basin of moonstone milk. The night the map was fully operational, the king stood over it with Harry, Griphook, Hilda, and Krav. The milky surface was a miniature, glowing landscape of the wing, pulsing with silent, colored lights, red for hostile, blue for their countermeasures, gold for untouched Gringotts wards. "We see you," the king murmured to the map, to the ghost it represented. His scarred cheek was pulled tight in a grim smile. "Now, we watch you dance." Harry stared at the beautiful, terrible map. He had taken the poison meant to kill him and turned it into an eye. He had used that eye to learn a new language of light and pressure. And now, he had helped give the mountain a living picture of its hidden disease. He was no longer just a boy who could see magic. He was the cartographer of its secrets. The maker of the map that would guide the mountain's vengeance. And on the map, a tiny, new red light flickered to life near the outer edge of the network, a fresh star-shaped monitor trying to establish itself. The ghost was still active, still probing. Harry pointed a small, steady finger at it. "There," he said. "They're trying again." Chapter 13, The Dead and the Demand. The living map in the Moonstone Basin was named the Edelscope by Master Krav. It became the secret, pulsing heart of the mountain's defense. Senior wardsmiths took shifts watching its milky surface, noting every flicker of red, every attempted incursion by the patient, invisible ghost. The counter-ghost, a tapestry of blue lies woven by Hilda's team, grew more sophisticated, feeding false stability reports back to the enemy's hubs. Harry's role shifted again. He was the calibrator, the one with the truest sight. Once a week, he would don the lens and walk the high-security wing with an escort, his senses stretched thin, checking for any distortion the Edelscope might have missed or misread. It was tense, silent work, a game of hide-and-seek played with a foe he could sense but never see. The rest of his time was a frantic balancing act. Mornings were still for runes and history with Griphook. Afternoons were split between the forge, where Borin was now teaching him the basics of alloy theory, how the song of iron changed when married to carbon, how copper whispered to tin to make bronze, and the map chamber, where he was expected to understand the reports, to think like a tactician. He was 7 years old, and his mind felt like a overstuffed book, pages filled with hammer blows, runic angles, political history, and the shimmering, malevolent topography of a magical siege. The strain began to show in small ways. He woke from dreams of shifting, red-lit landscapes. He sometimes heard the faint, dissonant hum of a hostile distortion in the quiet of the sunless suite, only to realize it was in his head, a phantom echo. The lens, while a tool, also felt like a weight. It showed him too much. The world was no longer simple surfaces, it was an endless, layered puzzle of intentions and hidden flaws. It was Griphook who finally intervened. He found Harry one evening staring blankly at a page of Griphook's own notes on the Goblin Wizard War of 1752, his eyes unfocused. "You are trying to drink from a fire hose," the prince said, not unkindly, closing the book. "You will drown in knowledge and be useless to everyone, including yourself." "I have to understand it all," Harry muttered, rubbing his eyes. "The ghost, the politics, the forging, it's all connected. If I miss a piece..." "You are a child," Griphook said, a surprising bluntness in his tone. "Even by your own people's measure. My father is using your gift because he must, but he is not a fool. He does not expect you to carry the mountain on your back. That is his burden. Yours is to learn, not to know everything today." He steered Harry away from the desk. "Tomorrow, there are no lessons. No forge. No map. We are going to the Whispering Falls." The Whispering Falls were not on any map of the bank's functional areas. They were deep in the oldest, natural part of the mountain, a place of leisure, not labor. A wide, slow underground river poured over a lip of smooth black rock into a vast, placid lake, its surface lit by thousands of glow-worms that clung to the cavern roof like a living, blue-green starfield. The air was cool and moist, smelling of wet stone and something sweet, like hidden flowers. The sound of the falling water was a constant, soothing murmur, the whisper that gave the falls their name. For the first hour, Harry simply sat on a flat rock at the water's edge, unable to relax. His mind kept trying to analyze the magical resonance of the water, to map the fall's pattern. Griphook said nothing. He skipped stones across the glassy lake, the plink 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 a counter rhythm to the fall's drone. Slowly, the immense, natural peace of the place seeped into Harry. The endless, urgent pressure in his chest began to ease. He took off his boots and let his feet dangle in the cold, clear water. He lay back on the rock, staring up at the galaxy of glow-worms. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about threats or lessons. He was just being. "This is also part of the mountain," Griphook said quietly, coming to sit beside him. "Not everything is a forge or a vault. A kingdom must have a heart that is not made of gold or steel. It must have places that simply are. For rest. For remembering why you defend the rest." Harry watched the soft blue light dance on the water. "It's easy to forget," he admitted. "It is the first thing warriors forget," Griphook agreed. "And the first thing kings are forced to remember, usually when it is almost too late." He was silent for a moment. "The life debt, Harry. We have not spoken of it directly in some time." Harry tensed slightly. The debt was the foundation of everything, yet it had become a background hum, like the mountain's song. "My father sees it as a chain, a strategic bond," Griphook continued, his voice thoughtful. "I see it as a road. One we are walking together. I owe you my life. But in saving me, you bound your life to this mountain, to its dangers. In a way, I have also bound you. The debt is not a one-way street. It is a shared path." He looked at Harry, his black eyes serious in the gloom. "You are carrying a weight for me, for my family. You should not carry it alone. That is what the debt means to me. Not just that I will die for you. That I will stand with you. Even when the weight is in your own mind." It was a different way of seeing it. Not as a cold contract, but as a partnership forged in a graveyard. Harry felt something hard and anxious in his chest loosen further. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate but sincere. They stayed at the falls until the glowworms began to dim, signaling the mountains, night. Harry felt clearer, cleaner, as if the whispering water had washed the psychic grime from his mind. The respite was brief but potent. He returned to his duties with a sharper, calmer focus. He could look at the etelscope without feeling like the red lights were crawling under his skin. He could listen to Boren's lectures on alloys and hear the music in the theory, not just the urgent need to master it. A week after the trip to the falls, a different kind of tension entered the mountain. It came not from the deep wards, but from the surface. A formal diplomatic missive, sealed with the crest of the British Ministry of Magic, was delivered by a stiff-looking owl to the Gringotts' main desk. The king read it in his study, his expression turning to granite. He summoned Harry and Griphook. The political storm Dumbledore warned of, he said, tossing the parchment onto the desk. It was heavy, official, covered in dense bureaucratic script. A request for clarification and assurance regarding the welfare and education of one Harry James Potter, ward of the Chief Warlock. Signed by Lucius Malfoy, in his capacity as a governor of Hogwarts School and a member of the Wizengamot. Malfoy. The name was a splinter of ice. Vault 713. One of the two red hearts on the Edelscope. He is using his political position, Griphook snarled. Hiding behind, concern for a child's magical upbringing. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. It is politics, the king said flatly. He has found a legitimate lever. The request is not an accusation. It is a demand for transparency. They want proof you are receiving a proper, magical education. They want to know why you are not with your blood relatives, or in a wizarding home. They want to force Dumbledore's hand, or ours. He looked at Harry. McGonagall's visits are our primary defense. But Malfoy is pushing for more. He suggests a neutral assessment by a ministry-appointed child welfare expert. It is a Trojan horse. The expert would be in his pocket. They would find deficiencies, cultural isolation, unsuitable influences. His lip curled. They would declare you are being goblinized and demand your immediate removal. Harry's stomach clenched. The peace of the Whispering Falls evaporated. What do? We fight with their own weapons, the king said. We give them transparency. But on our terms. A plan was clearly forming behind his burning eyes. You have been learning, Potter. But your education has a unique curriculum. We must create a parallel record. A transcript that would satisfy a wizarding bureaucrat. He turned to Griphook. We will establish a formal syllabus. History of magic, focusing on approved, ministry-friendly texts. Magical theory, basic principles of wand work and spellcasting theory, which you can teach from books. Mathematics. Languages. We will document it all. Ledgers, lesson plans, examinations. But I'm not learning those things, Harry protested. Not like that. You will, the king said. You will have two educations now. The real one, and the one we show the world. Griphook will teach you the surface lessons. You will learn enough to pass a basic assessment. You will be able to discuss the founding of Hogwarts, name the principal uses of dragon blood, and conjugate basic Latin verbs for charms. It will be a facade. A beautifully constructed, utterly convincing facade. It was another layer. Another secret to keep. Harry felt the weight returning, but it was a different weight. This was active deception, not just hidden learning. And when this expert comes? Griphook asked. They will not come, the king said, a sharp smile touching his lips. Because we will invite them. We will be so open, so cooperative, that their demand loses its force. We will invite a representative of the International Confederation of Wizards Child Welfare Committee, not the ministry. A truly neutral party. We will submit our syllabus, our records, and offer a supervised visit. We will bury Malfoy in procedure and propriety. He leaned forward. But to do that, the facade must be flawless. You must become, for a few hours, the perfect, well-adjusted, mildly educated wizarding child. Can you do that, Harry? Harry thought of the star-shaped distortions on the map. Of the oily residue of the tagging charm. This was just another kind of ghost. A ghost made of parchment and polite lies. He had learned to see those. Now he had to learn to be one. He thought of his mother's letter. Learn everything you can. Asterisk. Even this. Especially. This. Yes, he said, his voice firm. And so, Harry Potter's double life began in earnest. His days became a carefully partitioned mosaic. Mornings were now for wizarding studies, with Griphook, who proved to be a merciless tutor, drilling him on dates, laws, and theory from dry, ministry-approved textbooks that seemed designed to suck the magic out of magic. Harry learned to parrot the official version of the Goblin Rebellion's regrettable conflicts over misunderstandings of craft ownership, and to discuss the appropriate age-related magical milestones for a child his age. Afternoons were still split, but now the time at the forge or the map chamber felt like stealing back a piece of his soul. The real work, the song of the hammer, the truth of the lens, was his secret sustenance, the solid ground beneath the shifting sands of the facade. He learned to keep two sets of notes. One, in a neat, childish hand, detailed his progress in charms theory. The other, in a coded shorthand he and Griphook developed, held his real observations, the way a particular alloy resisted a distortion field, a new pattern he'd seen in the Ghost's network. The king, meanwhile, moved with bureaucratic brilliance. Letters were sent to the International Confederation, copies duly filed with the ministry. A meticulously crafted syllabus was submitted. Offers for a visit were extended with ostentatious openness. As predicted, Lucius Malfoy's faction found themselves mired in international protocol. They couldn't accuse Gringotts of non-cooperation. The demand for a ministry expert began to look like petty, nationalistic overreach. A month passed. The Ethelscope showed the Ghost's network quiescent, perhaps sensing the heightened scrutiny. Harry could now discuss the properties of unicorn hair in wand-making with a convincing, superficial knowledge, all while his fingers itched for the feel of a hammer or the cool weight of the lens. He was in the middle of one such dual lesson, reciting the ministry's list of non-wand magical traditions, a sanitized, dismissive paragraph on goblin metalwork while mentally reviewing the stress points on a vault door diagram, when a steward arrived with a message for Griphook. The prince read it, his face tightening. He dismissed the steward and turned to Harry. "The invitation has been accepted," he said, his voice low. "A representative from the International Confederation is coming. A witch named Eleodora Vance. She is known to be scrupulously fair, fiercely independent, and utterly immune to political pressure. She will be here in 3 days." The facade was about to face its first real inspection. Not from an enemy in disguise, but from a truly neutral, impeccably professional eye. Harry took a deep breath, setting down his quill. The childish notes on magical theory stared up at him. A lie. A necessary, carefully constructed lie. "Okay," he said, the word feeling like a vow. "I'm ready." He had learned to see ghosts, to map pressure, to forge a lens from poison. Now, he would have to perform the most difficult magic yet, to convincingly pretend to be ordinary. Chapter 30, The Unbreakable Vault. The war did not end with a bang, but with a silencing. The final, desperate assault on Gringotts' deepest wards was not an army, but a surgical strike. A cadre of unspeakables, their minds bent by years of Malfoy gold and whispered promises of pure blood supremacy, attempted what they called the Sundering Rite. Using artifacts looted from the very vaults they were meant to represent, they sought to sever the mountain's magical heart from its physical form, to turn stability into chaotic, crushing force. They failed. The Ethelscope, Harry's living map, had predicted the pressure points. The counter-ghosts, now a vast, intelligent lattice of defensive falsehoods, absorbed and redirected the sundering energy. The Heartstone in the deep gallery did not flinch. And Harry, now 14, no longer just a cartographer but a conductor, stood with King Ragnarok in the newly built tactical atrium, a chamber where the Ethelscope's basin was now 10 feet wide, fed by 1,000 scanning crystals. He did not wield a hammer. He did not inscribe a rune. He held his hands over the map, his seeker's lens now a permanent, faint emerald glint in his left eye, a graft of his own making. He felt the hostile will as a screaming red vortex on the map, a tornado of malice trying to drill into the mountain's core. "Now," the king said, his voice the calm at the eye of the storm. Harry breathed in, and with his will, he turned the Ethelscope from a map into a lock. He focused on the network of blue counter-ghosts, on the truths they were protecting, and on the single, unshakable law at the mountain's heart: a debt must be paid. A vault must hold. Asterisk. He poured that concept, the ironclad, goblin certainty of contract and containment, back through the scanning crystals, directly into the Sundering Rite. In the ministry sub-basement, the unspeakables, ritual circle did not explode. It inverted. The energy meant to sunder instead sealed. It turned inwards, wrapping each participant in a shell of perfect, unbreakable stasis, a living vault of their own making. They were not killed. They were filed away, eternally pending, a testament to a broken contract they never understood they had made. The silent victory echoed through magical Britain. The political house of cards Malfoy had built, already trembling under the weight of revealed truths and goblin-led audits, collapsed. Lucius Malfoy was arrested not by Aurors, but by Gringotts auditors, for breach of financial covenant and magical trespass. His wealth, the source of his power, was forfeit to the bank. The other old families, seeing the fate of their gold and their agents, capitulated. The war was over. Not with fire, but with a balanced ledger. Years had a different texture under the mountain. They were measured in ore yields, in the slow perfection of a masterwork blade, in the deepening of understanding. Harry grew, not tall, but dense with purpose. His shoulders were broad from the forge, his hands scarred and sure. The lightning scar on his forehead was now just one mark among many. A silver rune of protection inlaid by Master Krov sat beside it, a gift for his 16th birthday. His eyes, still Lily's brilliant green, held a weight of stone and a glint of polished steel. He was no longer a guest, or a ward. He was Harry Potter, apprentice wardsmith of Gringotts, holder of the life debt of Prince Griphook, and by the tacit, earned respect of the entire mountain, a voice in the deep council. He stood now at the entrance to a vault. Not his family's. A new one. Vault 1. It was in the deepest, most secure heart of the mountain, its door a masterpiece of collaborative art. Harry had forged the central lock mechanism, a puzzle of interlocking silver and adamant that required a specific magical resonance to open. Griphook had inscribed the outer warding runes, a song of such complexity it would take a millennium to brute force. Master Krov had layered the final, conceptual bindings: unity, legacy, unbreakable trust. Asterisk. Before the door stood the witnesses. King Ragnarok, older, his granite face a landscape of proud scars, the original axe cut still visible. Griphook, now crowned Prince Regent, wearing a circlet of office that mirrored his father's iron crown but was forged of platinum and etched with the lightning bolt rune, a symbol of the debt that had reshaped a kingdom. Professor McGonagall, headmistress of Hogwarts, her stern demeanor softened by time and a hard-won respect for the young man before her. And Albus Dumbledore, very old now, his twinkling eyes holding a piece that had been absent for decades. The terms are set, King Ragnarok's voice boomed in the quiet chamber. This vault shall hold the testament. The true history of the war. The records of the ghost, the sundering, the financial and political machinations. The lessons learned. It shall also hold the primary copy of the life debt contract between Griphook, son of Ragnarok, and Harry, son of James and Lily. Not as a chain, but as a foundation stone. He looked at Harry. The key is dual-born. Of wizard magic and goblin craft. Of the saved and the saver. It requires both to open. It is a vow that this history, and this bond, will never be forgotten, nor weaponized by one side against the other. It is a promise to the future. Harry nodded. He held out his right hand. Griphook placed his left hand over it. Together, they pressed their palms against the cool metal of the door. Harry reached for his magic, the wild, green, foundational power that was his birthright, now tempered and focused by years of discipline. Griphook reached for his, the deep, singing, earth-born power of the royal line. Their magics met at the point of contact, not merging, but braiding, forming a unique, harmonious key. The door accepted it. With a sound like a mountain sighing in contentment, it split open. Inside, the vault was not large. It held a single, polished obsidian plinth. On it rested a few items: a crystal vial holding a drop of black blood Dagmar's, taken as proof of treason, a twisted shard of the sundering artifact, a scroll bearing the balanced audit of the Malfoy accounts, and in the center, on a stand of woven silver and holly wood, the original, worn debt chit, now encased in clear crystal. It was not a trophy room. It was a seed vault. A place where the hard, sharp truths of the past could be preserved, studied, and understood by future generations of both peoples, so the same mistakes would not be sown again. As the door sealed shut behind them, the final, permanent wards clicking into place with a sound of absolute finality, the group stood in silence. The work of a lifetime, of saving, learning, fighting, and building, was crystallized in this secure, sacred space. Dumbledore spoke first, his voice thin but clear. I once feared what you might become, Harry, hidden away from our world. I see now I was looking through the wrong lens. You did not need to be shaped by Hogwarts to become a defender of what is right. You needed to be a bridge. And you have built one of stone and silver, strong enough to bear the weight of two worlds. McGonagall gave one of her rare, sharp smiles. He passed all his theoretical OWLs with, outstanding, you know. By correspondence. Never set foot in my classroom, but he could out-argue any of my 7th years on ward theory. Harry smiled back. It was true. The facade had long since become just another facet of the truth. Griphook clapped a hand on Harry's shoulder, the gesture easy, familiar. The debt remains, he said, not as a burden, but as a fact of nature, like gravity. But its weight is now the weight of this mountain. Shared. It is no longer a debt of life for life. It is a debt of purpose for purpose. We built this, he gestured to the vault, to the mountain around them, together. That is the payment that will never end. King Ragnarok looked from his son to Harry, his burnt gold eyes holding a profound, quiet satisfaction. You asked me once, Potter, what you were to do. You have answered it with every strike of your hammer, every rune you inscribed, every ghost you helped us see. You are a maker, a unifier. You are the living proof that wizard and goblin are not destined for endless war. That trust, forged in fire and sealed in stone, is the strongest magic of all. He turned, his gaze taking in the solid, eternal rock around them. The mountain is yours, Harry Potter. As much as it is any goblin's. Your blood is in its stones. Your magic is in its songs. Your vault, he nodded towards Vault 1, is in its heart. When the time comes for me to return to the stone, I will do so knowing the sundered throne has not one heir, but two. In blood, and in spirit. The pronouncement hung in the air, not as a shock, but as a long-awaited, inevitable truth. Harry felt not pride, but a deep, humbling sense of belonging. He had traded a cupboard for a mountain, and found a family in the process. Later, alone in the sunless suite, his room, now adorned with both books on advanced ward theory and the moving photograph of his parents, which still lived under his pillow, Harry stood before his workbench. On it lay two objects. The Seeker's lens, now a part of him. And a new project, just begun. A small, delicate model of Hogwarts Castle, not in wood or stone, but in interlocking, enchanted metals, a gift for the headmistress who had been his bridge. He was not the boy who lived. That was a title for storybooks, for a child he barely remembered. He was Harry Potter, Ward Smith, ghost catcher, friend to the prince, son of the mountain. He looked out through the enchanted wall of his suite, which showed a real-time view of the Whispering Falls, the glowworms shimmering like a captured piece of night sky. He thought of his parents, not with the old, sharp grief, but with a steady, loving warmth. They had given him life, and love. This mountain, this strange, fierce, glorious family, had given him a life worth living. He picked up his hammer, not the great one from the forges, but the small, perfect one Borin had given him on his first day. It felt like an extension of his own arm. There was always more to learn, more to make, more to protect. He smiled, a quiet, certain smile in the tranquil dark. The mountain slept around him, its heart secure, its songs deep and true. And Harry Potter, the smith of his own fate, was home.